Part 1. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 1. Luo Guang, if I had to choose between Raccoon City, Reach and Silent Hill, which one would you choose to travel through? In the quiet afternoon, there were only Luo Guang and one of his sons in the university dormitory. The other two people in the dormitory had gone out early to go shopping with their girlfriends. Only two people were left, one lying on the bed playing with his mobile phone and the other sitting on a chair. Play on the computer. Hearing his friend suddenly ask this, Luo Guang, who was lying on the bed playing with his mobile phone, didn't find it strange. After thinking about it, he replied, Raccoon City, it's relatively safe. Yeah. The friend's voice became very strange, and a hoarse and distorted voice suddenly sounded in Luo Guang's ears. Luo Guang moved his eyes from the phone to the bedside. What caught his eye was his friend's peeling skin, the corpse worms squirming in the black and red carrion, and the weird smile that made people feel scared. Ah! Luo Guang, who was sleeping soundly in his bed, woke up from his nightmare. He suddenly turned over and sat up on the wooden bed, his body already dripping with sweat. It's been several years since I graduated, why do I still have such nightmares? Luo Guang, who had already entered society, shook his head slightly and took a few deep breaths. Luo Guang, who was about to fall asleep again, paused and looked at the green quilt in his hand without sleep. This is not my quilt, I am not wearing pajamas, but a black vest that I have never seen before. Not only that. Luo Guang raised his head and looked around. He was not in a bedroom he was familiar with. The calico cat that often slept next to him was not there either. It was a room that he had no impression of. There is not much furniture in the house, just a bed, a desk, and a wardrobe, no extra decoration, that's it. Luo Guang, who had just woken up and was not fully awake, was confused for a while and could not confirm whether he was still in a dream. The protection system is loading. Suddenly, a neutral voice without emotion sounded in Luo Guang's mind. Before Luo Guang could think about the meaning of these words, a sharp pain suddenly exploded in Luo Guang's head, pushing Luo Guang back to the bed who was about to stand up. The words that appeared on the head of a certain flower burst out from Luo Guang's mouth. Luo Guang, who had not yet regained his balance, fell back, his eyes closed tightly, his hands firmly pressed on his painful head, and he curled up sideways. Loading progress 23.96%. Monitoring is completed, the adapter's fitness level is 120%, and the conditions are met. Continue loading. He obviously had a severe headache, but these words sounded clearly in Luo Guang's mind, and the pain became more and more intense, making Luo Guang lose the sense of the passage of time. The system has been loaded. Adapters are welcome to use it. I don't know how long it had been, but Luo Guang, who had been unable to activate his body's protective mechanism and passed out from pain, finally made it through. His whole body was already soaked. As the system was loaded, the pain in his head disappeared without a trace in an instant like an hallucination. Luo Guang, who was sweating all over, miraculously did not feel a trace of fatigue, but his stomach felt untimely. The drum. What is the system? Although he had some ideas in his mind, Luo Guang still asked. The protection system, whose full name is Adaptive Evolution Protection System, is a biological system program responsible for assisting adapters in completing their own evolution. This system relies on adapters to provide computing and power. Adapters are advised to pay attention to protecting brain health and adequate nutritional supplies. It's really the legendary golden finger. Luo Guang didn't say these words, he only thought in his heart, but the system still replied to him. This system is not a golden finger. This system is designed to assist the adapter in evolving and coordinating the adapter's physical development. Based on the adapter's knowledge, this system is more similar to an auxiliary biological optical brain. The voice sounded in his mind, and it also made Luo Guang understand that he only needed to think of what to say in his mind to communicate with the system. Thinking of this, Luo Guang got up and got out of bed, searching this unfamiliar room while doing two things at once, and asked in his mind, "What does the assistant mean?" Judging from the tone of the system, it is not the kind of plug-in system that can be exchanged for powerful items, but it is an epoch-making product. In order to make the best use of everything, Luo Guang urgently needs to understand the functions of the system and make plans. 1. The physical fitness and skills of digital adapters. 2. Assist the adapter to control the body, improve the accuracy and strength of movements and reduce the consumption of endurance. 3. Assist memory and learning. 4. Predict and help adapters choose evolutionary routes. Other functions will be enabled after conditions are met. My current body data is seemed to trigger the keyword. Luo Guang had just had the idea of checking the body data, and the system had already processed the data and appeared in front of Luo Guang's eyes. Adapter number, 00001S. Name, Luo Guang. Adaptability level, S. Age, 25 years old. Gender, male. Luo Guang glanced at some basic information and skipped it, focusing on the latter part. Strength, 7, standard male is 5, this attribute is a combination of grip strength, explosive strength, upper and lower limb strength, etc. Flexibility, 7, standard male is 5, this attribute is a combination of agility, flexibility, body reaction speed, jumping ability, etc. Endurance, 8, standard male is 5, this attribute is a combination of lung capacity, muscular endurance, cardiovascular endurance, etc. This chapter is not over yet, please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. Intelligence, 6, standard male is 5, this attribute is a combination of thinking speed, IQ, EQ, memory, imagination, etc. Willpower, 10, standard male is 5. Special ability, none. The standard value is 5, but I am above the standard. Luo Guang looked at his good value and was quite proud of it. It was worth it to keep self-discipline for so long. The limit of human body is 12. It is easy to exceed the standard value, but it is difficult to break the limit. Adapters still need to work hard. Just when Luo Guang was a little complacent, the system poured a bucket of cold water. Luo Guang paused slightly when he heard the system's words while rummaging through the drawer. After curling his lips, he continued to rummage. He did not have the idea of convincing the mechanical system, so he asked, "What do you mean by adaptability?" Adaptability refers to the degree of adaptation to the system. At the same time, the higher the adaptability, the more evolutionary paths can be chosen, and the more likely it is to surpass the human limit and complete human evolution. The system responded quickly. Human evolution, Luo Guang was puzzled. How could he represent the evolution of all mankind? The successful evolution of an individual means that mankind has the possibility of evolution. It is difficult to go from 0 to 1, but it is very simple to go from 1 to 2. The system made a slight analogy, just like the development of various human technologies. Are there other adapters, because the information that emerged contained number information, plus what the system just mentioned? Luo Guang asked with some concern. It is different for one person to have a system and for a group of people to have a system. Scarcity makes things valuable. If many people have the system, I have to think carefully about how to ensure my advantage. This system is the first to be adaptively installed. According to monitoring, no other adapters have been found within the range. At the same time, the system has entered stealth mode immediately after installation and startup based on the personality of the adapter, and has scanned to ensure that there are no startup reactions from other adapters. Although the system's words sound good, it is unclear whether there will be new adapters in the future, and the system's words sound like it has been secretly observing me for a long time. Keep scanning at intervals. Luo Guang could only keep the system alert. Luo Guang chatted with the system and confirmed the system's capabilities, and finally completed the search of the entire room. Fortunately, the room was not large, a single-story apartment with one living room, one bedroom, one kitchen, and one bathroom, and very few furniture and personal items. Luo Guang did not spend much time to complete the search. Luo Guang bit off a corner of the chocolate board and searched for the items he found on the dining table. Suddenly, he saw a work permit with a well-known biological company. Luo Guang, who was chewing the bitter chocolate, could not help but stop and fell silent. Umbrella Company, Madfak. After a short silence, there were several consecutive swear words. The notorious company logo of a certain game was very conspicuously printed in the upper right corner of the work permit, and the employee's identity information was also printed. The name was the same as Luo Guang's, and the department he belonged to was the Raccoon City branch of the Intelligence Department of Umbrella Company, but there was no photo posted on it, which seemed more suitable for Luo Guang to fish in troubled waters. In addition, there was only a long string of employee numbers. Luo Guang, who likes to read novels to regulate his body and mind after fitness, naturally understands at this moment that he has encountered a time travel, and it is very likely that he has replaced an employee of Umbrella with the same name and surname, and is naturally on the opposite side of the protagonists of Resident Evil. But Luo Guang has no good way for the time being except to curse, and can only do things step by step. Although he has a system, it seems that this system is much weaker than other systems with causality, but whether it can succeed in the end depends on himself who has the system. In addition to the work permit, Luo Guang also saw a machine of unknown purpose, but Luo Guang did not know how to use it. He put on headphones and no sound came out of it. Because it was heavy, Luo Guang did not move the machine to the dining table. There are also weapons for self-defense. Luo Guang found a Beretta M9 pistol and a telescopic dagger in the drawer under the table where the machine of unknown purpose was placed. The pistol in Luo Guang's hand has a matte finish and a silencer installed. It is 217 mm long, weighs 0.96 kilograms when empty, has an initial velocity of 333.7 m/s, and an effective range of 50 m. Although Luo Guang still likes to watch various military videos, he only watches them briefly. Most of the specific information about this pistol is told to Luo Guang by the system. According to the system description, a large part of the huge amount of data during the installation process is various information knowledge in this world. To some extent, this system can be regarded as Luo Guang's personal database. In addition, Luo Guang also found 3 matching 15-round magazines and a box of 40 parabellum pistol bullets. Due to his living environment, Luo Guang did not have the knowledge to use firearms. Now that he has the conditions, Luo Guang put aside his research on other things and immediately let the system teach him how to use them on the spot. After eating something, it is just right to do some light exercise to help digestion, Luo Guang thought. The isosceles triangle shooting method, in simple terms, is to face the target with your body, spread your feet slightly wider than shoulder width, bend your knees to form an elastic support, and bring your toes inwards. Keep your chest and shoulders down to lower your body's center of gravity. Extend your arms naturally, hold the gun with your right hand, and hold the trigger guard with your left hand facing inwards. Or hold the bottom of the handle with your palm facing up, and keep the gun horizontal. This chapter is not over yet, please click on the next page to continue reading. Although this shooting method allows the designer to maintain shooting stability, it lacks flexibility. However, for Luo Guang, who does not have much muscle memory, this shooting method is the most suitable. Therefore, after Luo Guang asked the system if there was any related shooting method, the system immediately selected the shooting method suitable for novices. Luo Guang practiced a few times with the gun, and asked the system to help correct his posture. After spending more than 20 minutes, he finally got the system's approval. In case of emergencies, at least he can maintain a relatively standard posture to shoot. Looking at the umbrella company's special electronic bracelet on his hand, the time was close to 7:30. At this time, Luo Guang remembered that although he knew that he had traveled to a world where the outbreak of the biochemical crisis was as common as eating, he still had no idea where he was now. Thinking of this, Luo Guang turned his eyes to a notebook on the table. He flipped it open and felt a cold sweat on his forehead. A name familiar to anyone who knows anything about the Resident Evil game series, Jill Valentine, came into view. Luo Guang, who was a little unwilling to give up, flipped through the notebook again. The content inside can basically be regarded as Jill Valentine's life diary. What he did at every time was recorded clearly, even some phone conversations with others were recorded. This room is the room of the person who monitors Jill Valentine, and from some information in the log, Luo Guang already knows that his location is probably the city that will be razed to the ground sooner or later, Raccoon City. The terrain around Raccoon City is complex, surrounded by mountains on three sides, and only one side has a passage leading to the outside world, but for Luo Guang, escaping from the range of the nuclear strike is the top priority. Thinking of this, Luo Guang did not plan to stay in this room any longer, and immediately began to pack up the things he found. He tore off the umbrella logo on the black backpack with Velcro and threw it aside. Luo Guang kept putting bottles of water into the backpack. After hesitating for a while, he stuffed the notebook he had not finished reading into it. As for the pistol and the loaded magazine, Luo Guang inserted them into the inside of a coat. This coat was placed beside the bed. After special modification, it looks like an ordinary black jacket on the outside, without any decorations, giving people a cool feeling. But on the inside of the clothes are slots for pistols and pistol magazines, and of course there is an inner pocket for other things. In addition to the pistol, Luo Guang also found a retractable dagger that was also matte finished. This dagger was not big, so Luo Guang stuffed it directly into his trouser pocket instead of the inner pocket of his black jacket, so that he could take it out and use it at any time. After packing up, Luo Guang once again confirmed that the equipment on his body would not affect his actions. When he was about to push the door and leave the room, a sound that resounded throughout the apartment was heard, and the entire apartment building shook as if it was about to collapse. Then a strange roar sounded, and a wall in the room was punched through by a giant human, but Luo Guang did not react at the first time, but half opened his mouth and watched the giant fist that pierced the wall retract with a confused look on his face. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 2. It's a mass-produced tyrant of the T-virus, codenamed Nemesis, and is probably on a mission to track and destroy the system's calm voice sounded in Luo Guang's mind, and it also brought Luo Guang back to his senses. He didn't know where the system's data came from, but Luo Guang didn't have the time or mood to ask this question at this time. Luo Guang said that he didn't have any idea of being a hero to help, and at this time he only thought about how to stay away from the biological weapon called Nemesis. I'm not the protagonist, I only have a small pistol and a small dagger in my hand, but I can't beat the tyrant-type biological weapon, and I don't want to be punched in the head by the tyrant. Thinking so in his heart, Luo Guang pulled the pistol out from the inside of his black jacket while moving away from the direction of the continuous rough sound, opened the safety and pressed the hammer like in the movie. After making the pistol ready to shoot, Luo Guang then hid most of his body behind the sofa, half crouched with both hands holding the gun and aiming at the wall in front of him. Luo Guang, who had just arrived, had no idea of escaping, because he was not familiar with the roads in the city and did not know where to escape, so now he was more thinking about how to avoid the hatred of the goddess of vengeance. If the information of the system was correct, he was not the target of the goddess of vengeance, and the identity of the owner of this room was an employee of Umbrella Corporation, which made Luo Guang have the plan of waiting and waiting for the situation to change. Frightened, Luo Guang tightly grasped the pistol. The excitement of getting the system at the beginning could not cover up the uncontrollable fear in Luo Guang's heart at this moment. Indeed, because of the developed film and television before crossing, he had a strong adaptability to situations such as zombies, but whether the specific situation was the same as what he saw in the film and television, Luo Guang was not clear at this moment. The sound of fighting from the next room was like a war drum, and every beat was stimulating Luo Guang's heart. After all, he was just a civilian. Although he did not know why he crossed here, it was clear that this world was not so friendly and harmonious. And now he did not have much combat power. Even if he used a gun, he was not as good as those civilians born in the Beacon country where guns and bullets were free. At this time, Luo Guang was thinking wildly, but the fear miraculously began to fade away, but this did not change the fact that Luo Guang was still a lamb to be slaughtered. He could only wait for the mercy of the butcher next door to be able to raise his hand and let him go. When he traveled to this world, did he replace the Luo Guang who belonged to the intelligence department of Umbrella Corporation? Luo Guang was not sure. His appearance and body shape were the same as his impression. In addition, he did not obtain the memory of that Luo Guang and did not trust the IQ of biological weapons, so Luo Guang had long given up the idea of contacting the Umbrella personnel who were observing and collecting the battle data of the tyrant. Perhaps he was thinking about what would happen next. Although the next door was still very intense, Luo Guang was surprised to find that he was not as nervous and afraid as he was at the beginning, but was thinking calmly. Does that thing have any weaknesses? The object of Luo Guang's inquiry was naturally the system in his mind. All fear comes from insufficient firepower. With the current weapons of the adapter, this system does not recommend that the adapter and the tyrant clash. The system seemed to think that Luo Guang was going to cause trouble, so it told Luo Guang not to commit suicide. Understood. Luo Guang naturally did not bother to explain. It was better to be direct when talking to a rigid computer, so Luo Guang directly stated that he would not do anything stupid. The system continued to explain how to deal with it. The main function of the tyrant, codenamed the Goddess of Vengeance, is to track and destroy. Unless the adapter blocks its way, it will not be actively pursued by it. It means that if you stay hidden and avoid this tyrant, you can avoid being threatened by this thing. Luo Guang converted the system's words into words that he could understand. Although it seemed that the two chatted in his mind for several minutes, in fact, only 1 minute had passed. The battle in the next room became more and more intense. In addition to the noise made by the tyrant's random smashing, Luo Guang seemed to hear the roar of a woman. Although he had never met the woman next door and did not know her name, Luo Guang's answer was obvious from the people he was monitoring here and the fact that he was being hunted by the tyrant. The person living next door was most likely Jill Valentine, one of the protagonists of Resident Evil 3. If this was really the world under the worldview of Resident Evil, the other party would definitely be able to survive. Luo Guang thought, I don't know where this confidence in strangers came from. Perhaps this was just Luo Guang trying to suppress the guilt he felt for not saving someone. The sound of the tyrant and Jill fighting continued, and with a loud bang, the sound of the two fighting gradually faded away. After a long time, after confirming that there was no sound of fighting, Luo Guang slowly opened the door of his apartment, took a look at the situation outside the door, and immediately covered his mouth and nose with one hand and squatted down. At this time, what Luo Guang saw was a mess after the battle, and Luo Guang's first reaction was that the sound insulation and heat insulation of the room where he woke up was so good that he almost didn't know he was roasted. A fire had started outside the door at some point, crackling and burning, as if reminding Luo Guang that time was running out. Due to the tyrant's attack, the door of the next room had been broken into pieces, and holes had been smashed into the wall, causing Luo Guang to wonder if the tyrant would bring down the entire building if he continued to attack. Fortunately, the fire was not too big, so Luo Guang was not trapped by the fire. Luo Guang quickly jumped over the hole in the floor that he didn't know how to make. After slightly looking up to confirm, he quickly moved towards the emergency passage of the apartment according to the safety passage sign on the wall that was about to fall. Since waking up, he has never exercised like this. At this time, Luo Guang realized how powerful the system's auxiliary body movement was. The length of the footsteps, the strength of the bounce, the coordination of the body movements, etc., the whole action was smooth, making him like a parkour athlete, and these parkour movements were like eating. Luo Guang could move as he pleased. On the way to the emergency passage, Luo Guang, who was covering his mouth, glanced at the fire cabinet on the side and stopped. Luo Guang's goal was naturally not to put out the fire with the equipment inside. Luo Guang picked up the fire extinguisher on the side and smashed the rusty lock on it, and then picked up the fire axe that everyone loved inside. Luo Guang glanced at the rust on the axe, held the axe handle close to the axe with his right hand, adjusted his body center of gravity, and continued to run to the emergency passage. The road was smooth, and no zombies were encountered. I wonder if the other people in the apartment had already escaped. The road was not blocked by the fire or collapsed concrete blocks. Luo Guang followed the fire ladder and came to the back street of the apartment. Without the thick smoke, Luo Guang took a deep breath of fresh air mixed with a little garbage smell, pulled out the fire axe inserted on the left side of the backpack, and looked around. A red-eyed little mouse was frightened by Luo Guang, who fell from the sky. It ran to a large garbage bin in panic and stood up. Looking at Luo Guang, it waved its little claws arrogantly, threatening Luo Guang not to get close to it. The red-eyed mouse still maintained its timid characteristics, so its intimidation was naturally ignored by Luo Guang, and the little mouse immediately ran away. After confirming that the surroundings were safe, Luo Guang listened to the sounds in the building. There were still some sounds of fighting and destruction in the apartment building, which further verified what Luo Guang had thought before, that the room where he woke up was too soundproof. The sounds of shouting for help, the sound of burning flames, the sound of car alarms, etc. mixed together, hovering over the huge raccoon city, adding a little musical color to this hell. Taking advantage of the temporary safety in the alley, Luo Guang began to think about the next step. What he needed now were weapons, a map of Raccoon City and some supplies. Luo Guang judged his current primary purpose based on all the items he had now. In the face of such a disaster, most people would choose to escape from dangerous places. Naturally, at this time, the road was either full of cars or blocked due to traffic accidents. But no matter which situation, for Luo Guang, the only way to escape Raccoon City for the time being was the following options. The first is to walk to the outskirts of the city and then leave the impact range of the nuclear explosion by car, or even other means of transportation such as motorcycles or bicycles. The second is to leave through the underground railway of Raccoon City, or through the underground transportation system of Umbrella Corporation. Luo Guang thought of the Umbrella ID card he was carrying. He didn't know if he could use this ID card to escape using Umbrella's underground transportation system. This was Luo Guang's third option. Although Luo Guang only had a general understanding of the plot of the Resident Evil game and didn't remember many details, he still remembered that Umbrella had been on the decline since the Raccoon City incident. Within a few years, the huge Umbrella was broken up and eaten up by other capitals. In addition, Luo Guang had no loyalty to Umbrella, so he had already planned to abandon or simply use this identity. Getting rid of the identity constraints of Umbrella was also a relatively important thing in Luo Guang's view. Don't be bitten to death by zombies or shot to death by Umbrella's enemies. In addition, he himself was a relatively easygoing person. It would be great to be a cute little civilian and not participate in those damn struggles. Luo Guang was thinking about this in his heart, and suddenly heard a very destructive sound approaching at a very fast speed. With a bang, a pretty figure in a blue tube top rushed out of the back door of the apartment next to him. Before Luo Guang could see who it was, there was another bang. The back door of the apartment collapsed suddenly, and a cloud of dust and sparks passed by. The figure waved to sweep away the dust, coughed a few times, and was about to get up. When he turned around, he saw Luo Guang with a surprised face. At this time, Luo Guang roared in his heart, "I don't want to be associated with the protagonist group, a group of unlucky stars." But in fact, Luo Guang still did a good job on the surface. He changed the fire axe in his right hand to his left hand. Luo Guang extended his right hand to help the other person sitting on the ground stand up in a friendly manner. With a happy expression of seeing a survivor, he said happily, "Hello, my name is Luo Guang. It's great. I finally saw a living person in such a day." Looking at the other party's escape posture and the sound of smashing and smashing that followed, the pretty beauty in front of him was most likely Jill Valentine, who was monitored by the original Luo Guang. "I'm Jill Valentine, you can just call me Jill," as expected by Luo Guang, the name came out of the other party's mouth. Without waiting for Luo Guang to answer, Jill continued, "It's not safe here now, let's leave here quickly." "Is that the thing that was chasing you just now?" Luo Guang looked a little timid and said, "I heard a loud fighting sound, and then you ran out of the door as if you were running away from something." This chapter is not finished yet. Please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. Gil, who originally wanted to ask Luo Guang why he knew he was being chased by the tyrant, heard what Luo Guang said later and realized how loud the fight between the tyrant and him was. That's Umbrella's biochemical weapon tyrant. It's a long story to tell you the specific situation. Let's get out of here first. Although the goddess of revenge is now crushed under the rubble, Jill doesn't believe that this can kill the tyrant. He was crushed to death by the weapon, so Luo Guang was urged to leave this place of right and wrong first. "Okay, I'm going to find some weapons and food supplies. Do you know where these things can be found nearby?" Luo Guang pretended to be embarrassed and scratched his head and said, "I just came to Raccoon City not long ago, and it turned out, encountered such a thing." He had just traveled to this Raccoon City more than an hour ago. Naturally, he was not lying, and it could also explain why he didn't know the way. When Gil heard Luo Guang's words, he lowered his head and saw that the holster on his leg was also empty. There was not even a weapon in his body. He nodded and recognized Luo Guang's current goal in his heart. "It is true that I need to find some weapons now so that I will not be helpless when encountering a tyrant again." At this time, Gil thought of the call he had received from his STARS teammates, and said to Luo Guang, "Follow me, I know a place." After saying that, Jill turned and left. Luo Guang nodded with an obedient look on his face and glanced at the rubble pile at the door. "There is no movement for the time being, which gives me a little peace of mind. Don't wake up so quickly. At least wait until Jill takes me to get supplies and equipment." Luo Guang thought so, and quickly took the fire axe and followed Gil Valentine, who was looking back to confirm whether Luo Guang was following. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 3. Following Gil, who was familiar with the terrain and routes, Luo Guang finally ran out of the complicated alley. There is already a hellish scene outside the alley. Groups of zombies are wandering in this living hell, chasing the taste of food, and then swarming up to devour them all. Just as Luo Guang thought, Jill has rich experience in dealing with zombies. In just a few seconds, Jill discovered that he could sneak past and just need to quietly deal with a few zombies blocking his way. So without disturbing the other zombies, Gil borrowed Luo Guang's telescopic dagger and led Luo Guang to follow the path formed in his mind and eliminate the zombies blocking the road one by one. When Gil asked Luo Guang to borrow a weapon at first, he actually wanted to borrow Luo Guang's fire axe. But Luo Guang didn't know if it was because of any stereotypes about the Resident Evil game series. When Jill asked him to borrow a weapon, his first reaction was to give Jill his telescopic dagger and said, "This is more suitable." Gil took the telescopic dagger and popped out the dagger blade. After confirming that it was not a toy for a gangster, He nodded to Luo Guang and said, "Indeed, this weapon is more suitable for our current situation." Luo Guang's original intention was that this weapon was suitable for Jill, but Jill obviously misunderstood Luo Guang's original intention. Gil was referring to the fact that the zombies did not notice the two of them, so a dagger that was labor-saving, fast to attack, and could be used for stabbing was indeed better than a fire axe that could only be used for chopping. Looking at Luo Guang's face, he looked like he was experiencing a biohazard for the first time. Jill couldn't help but remember that he looked like this when he first encountered a biochemical incident. However, Luo Guang did a good job in controlling the details, and he was able to survive until now. The vast majority of people do not rely on luck alone. After a second thought, Gil began to teach Luo Guang some knowledge on how to deal with zombies, and said, "Luo Guang, follow me later, watch your steps, stay quiet, and see how I deal with these zombies." Luo Guang nodded in response and thought, does Jill mean to prepare for on-site teaching? Luo Guang was also very interested in this. After all, he only had a theoretical basis before. Compared with Gil, who had fought with real swords and guns and biological and chemical weapons, he was just talking on paper now. For example, everyone knows that the heads of these zombies are their weak points. However, in fact, the head of a recently mutated zombie, as the hardest part of the human body, also provides a lot of protection for the zombie's brain. After being infected by the T-virus, the skull will only become harder. Not to mention that there are cases where pistol bullets get stuck in the skull, and blindly stabbing with a knife will only miss the opportunity to destroy the zombies. Therefore, Luo Guang also put aside other thoughts and followed Jill to study seriously, such as how to avoid wandering zombies, how to kill zombies with one blow, etc. These all inspired Luo Guang. After passing through 2 streets and an alley safely, Luo Guang and Gil came to a small alley. After observing the wall, they said to Luo Guang, "This is the S.T.A.R.S safe house." After saying that, Jill pulled out a brick from the outer wall, took out the key from inside, and opened a door in the alley. "Jill." As soon as Gil and Luo Guang entered the door, they heard a man's voice. Luo Guang closed the door gently and looked back into the room. A man wearing a yellow warning uniform was sitting on the sofa, with several pistols on the table in front of him. Luo Guang was keenly aware that the gun in the opponent's hand was pointed at Luo Guang vaguely, while Luo Guang showed a look of ignorance and calmly shrank behind Jill. "This is Brad Vickers." After Jill finished speaking, he introduced Luo Guang to Brad and said, "This is Luo Guang." Jill, the man named Brad, spoke again, but this time there was a hint of dissatisfaction in his tone, and he looked at Luo Guang with suspicion in his eyes. "Hello, Vickers." Luo Guang took the initiative to greet Brad. Brad didn't respond and turned around to continue playing with the firearms on the table. "Sorry, Brad has encountered a lot of things recently, so he is a little suspicious. Like me, he is also from STARS." Jill saw that the two of them seemed to be having trouble getting along, so he quickly came out to smooth things over. Her own identity was mentioned before entering the alley. After all, the place where Jill brought Luo Guang was a safe house belonging to STARS. Of course, she had to tell Luo Guang her identity as STARS first. "Former STARS," Brad corrected with a somewhat annoyed tone, but the annoyance in his tone seemed to be directed at someone who was not present. Although there is still an STARS office in the police station, after the mansion incident, the entire STARS team has gone their separate ways. In addition, the members of STARS did not listen to the instructions and were still investigating the umbrella company, which led to the direct cancellation of the staff by the police chief. Gil shrugged and said, "Now is not the time for small talk. Are the weapons mentioned before ready?" This STARS safe house was prepared under the leadership of Brad after the mansion incident. In Raccoon City, which is ruled by Umbrella Corporation, it has taken Brad more than a month to build such a safe house. In order to avoid alerting the Umbrella Company, Brad could only carefully avoid people who were monitoring him when purchasing weapons. Therefore, the weapons in this safe house were basically small personal weapons, mainly pistols and melee weapons. This chapter is not finished yet, please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. No other types of firearms other than pistols were found in Luo Guang's site. Brad raised his chin and pointed to the other side of the safe house. Jill looked in the direction where Brad's chin was pointing. A small and exquisite G19 pistol, a G18 pistol and several loaded magazines were placed on a wooden table next to a dark green gun cabinet. "Thank you," Gil thanked casually and walked over. The weapons on the table were all prepared by Jill after she told Brad to prepare them. Therefore, without thinking about it, Jill directly tied a tactical belt around her waist. Then she inserted the weapons and ammunition on the table into the belt one by one, and finally put the G19 pistol. It was inserted into the holster on the thigh. "Luo, thank you for the knife." Jill handed Luo Guang back the telescopic dagger that Luo Guang lent her to use to open a path. "You're welcome, Gil, I've learned a lot from following you." Luo Guang quickly waved his hand and replied. Jill understood that Luo Guang was referring to the technique of killing zombies, and couldn't help but sigh at Luo Guang's talent in learning. Gil used his peripheral vision to check the situation of Luo Guang, who was following him several times. It could be seen that although his movements were still a bit immature, in his opinion, he had barely passed the level of covert action. In order to avoid being scolded by Brad, who suspected him, Luo Guang followed Jill to the table. After hearing what Gil said, Luo Guang leaned the fire axe aside, took the telescopic dagger with both hands, and put it back in his trouser pocket. He then heard Gil say, "There are many guns here, you can also choose one. Do you have any experience with guns?" Luo Guang didn't tell Jill that he still had a gun hidden on his body. He shook his head and said, "I don't know much about guns." "Jill, time is running out," Brad quickly reminded when he saw that Jill and Luo Guang were about to chat. With that said, Brad walked directly between the two of them and said, "As long as the gun can be fired." As he spoke, Brad looked at Luo Guang up and down, and then focused on the shape of Luo Guang's hands. Without seeing the calluses, he turned around and took out a G17 pistol and several matching magazines from the gun stand standing on the table in front of Luo Guang. He said, "You can just use this one. It is easy to maintain, has good quality, and has few malfunctions. It has 17 rounds in a magazine, which meets the needs. Can it compress bullets? I probably know how to do it, but I haven't actually practiced it." It seems that Brad is the kind of person who is cold on the outside and hot on the inside, Luo Guang thought, and in order to match the character, he quickly said that he had never suppressed a bullet. "Well." Brad sighed and took out a few boxes of 9mm bullets from under the gun stand. While pressing the bullets, he began to teach Luo Guang how to use the G17 pistol. Gil on the side glanced at Brad, smiled, opened another cabinet under the gun stand, took a short knife out of it after looking at it for a few times. "I don't know where Brad got it. There is no relevant brand logo on the short knife, so the system cannot determine what brand of weapon it is based on the database, and naturally cannot provide relevant weapon parameters." Jill did not ask Brad to prepare knives for herself. These knives were placed here by Brad as a backup just in case, so they were not placed on the table in front of Jill. Jill is relatively bad at close combat, so she doesn't have any special preferences. However, after going through the journey just now, Jill decided to bring a knife for close combat. It can't deal with the tyrant-type biochemical weapons and bullies. A little zombie is pretty good. Jill, who was ready to go, was about to ask Brad some questions. Boom. 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 A rhythmic and oppressive sound appeared in the direction of the door where Luo Guang and his two men came in. Luo Guang's first reaction was that the goddess of revenge was chasing after them. Luo Guang couldn't care about that much at this time. He used both hands to directly pick up the loaded G17 pistol and a box of 9mm bullets on the table in front of him. Then he swiped away from the direction of the door he came in and asked quickly, "Which is the back door?" In addition to the blue rusty iron door that came in, there are two doors in the house, one red and one black. Neither door has a slogan on it. Luo Guang doesn't want to choose the wrong door and waste important time and then open it and find out it's the bathroom. Black door. Brad also heard the voice outside the door, and naturally understood the identity of the uninvited guest outside the door. He had been chased by the nemesis before. After successfully getting rid of the enemy, he immediately found a way to contact Jill to gather at the safe house and escape from Raccoon City. Regarding Luo Guang's behavior, Brad quickly reacted and shouted to Jill and Luo Guang. Brad, who once left Jill and others behind because of fear of zombies and fled in a helicopter, had some determination in his eyes. "I succeeded once, and I can do it this time too," Brad cheered for himself in his heart. Even with the addition of Jill, Brad didn't think he could defeat the Furies with just the weapons he had here. Although she thought that Nemesis would lose her sensitivity just because she was tall, Brad initially thought about escaping to avoid being pursued by Nemesis, but failed. No matter how he escaped, the goddess of revenge would always find him. At that time, Brad himself had not been able to recover his lost physical strength. In the end, Brad burst out with great will to survive and dealt with Nemesis. Finally, he successfully caused Nemesis to suspend her activities by detonating the explosives found left by the police. At this time, there was still a little explosive left, and they just lacked some more powerful weapons, so Brad took the remaining explosive to the safe house. Therefore, Brad was not innocently thinking of sacrificing himself to delay the enemy at this time. As for Luo Guang, who was not the target of the goddess of revenge, he would naturally choose to run away when encountering such an insurmountable biological weapon. Therefore, Brad didn't care about Luo Guang's escape. This is human nature. This is Brad's understanding of why Luo Guang reacted so quickly. Because Luo Guang was brought by Gil, it is very likely that Luo Guang had met a tyrant, which would explain why Luo Guang, a civilian, had such a big reaction after hearing the footsteps. When Jill saw that Brad, who had left everyone behind during the mansion incident and ran away, immediately wanted to cover herself and Luo Guang as they left, her red lips slightly opened, but in the end she didn't say anything. Time was running out, and with a twist of his head, Gil was about to leave the safe house with Luo Guang. After hearing Brad's words, Luo Guang immediately ran towards the black door. With a push of his left hand, he climbed over the sofa, flew across the smooth table, rolled around on the ground to relieve his pressure, and soon arrived in front of the black door. In order to prevent someone from killing someone by opening the door, Luo Guang directly opened the door with force, took aim with his gun, and then poked his head out to quickly check whether there were any zombies ambushing him. Safe. After Luo Guang confirmed it was safe, he immediately turned back to confirm the situation. Brad roared to attract the attention of the goddess of revenge, and then he raised his guns without hesitation and kept pulling the triggers. Since the mission target was anxious to die, the goddess of revenge would not let go of the STARS member in front of her. She protected her head and eyes with her left hand, and with her right shoulder facing the direction of Brad, who was not escaping, she rushed towards him. Luo Guang did not stay long. After confirming that the goddess of revenge did not target him and Gil, he hurriedly waved Gil to leave. However, within a few steps of leaving the safe house, Jill said to Luo Guang, "This tyrant's target is probably me. It will become more dangerous for you to follow me." What Jill originally wanted to ask Brad was about the tyrant-type biochemical weapon that was chasing her. Maybe it was just a woman's intuition, but Jill felt that when the tyrant crashed into the safe house, his eyes were instantly on her. Most zombies move slowly, and as long as they avoid the close attack, it is nothing compared to the threat of the tyrant tracking behind them. Jill thought to herself, and only after careful consideration did she take the initiative to propose separate actions. Luo Guang pretended not to understand what the tyrant meant, but time was tight, so he could only simply advise, "Tyrant? But no matter what, if we act together, there will always be support." Jill made up her mind, shook her head, and spoke clearly in a few words. She told Luo Guang his guess and told Luo Guang to go to the police station for help before running towards the safe house without looking back. Luo Guang's hand that wasn't holding the gun stretched out in the direction where Jill left. "Wait." Before he finished speaking, a roar came from behind. Luo Guang didn't pause for a moment. When he heard a sound from behind him, he drew his knife and pressed it, popping out the sharp dagger. He turned around and looked at the zombie walking slowly in front of him with his body weighing less than a pound. Perhaps he was a little annoyed by Jill's behavior of returning to die. Luo Guang moved his wrist and quickly took a few steps in the direction of the zombie. He got close to the zombie and dodged sideways to avoid the expected attack. In front of the eyes of the charging zombie was a telescopic dagger that had been waiting for him. Insert, with a twist of the wrist. Then the right hand holding the gun gently pushed the zombie aside with the muzzle of the gun, and pulled out the telescopic dagger. The zombie collapsed and fell behind Luo Guang, who was walking out of the alley. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 4. Finally, I don't have to pretend anymore. Looking at another zombie staggering towards Luo Guang put down his disguise, but he was thinking about something else. Although the system didn't speak, Luo Guang vaguely felt that the system was exercising its right to remain silent, rather than not responding to his words. The sound of fighting began to faintly come from the alley behind him, pulling Luo Guang's thoughts back to more urgent things. Facing the zombie in front of him, Luo Guang simply kicked the zombie's knee, then went around behind the zombie and put the knife into it from the position of the ear. As long as you learn the skills, it will become very simple to deal with these zombies that have no intelligence and can't run much. I'm getting more and more skilled. Thinking this, Luo Guang quickly left the alley, then hid behind a broken down car and looked forward. According to Luo Guang's original plan, after replenishing food and water and possible weapons and ammunition, he would hurry to escape from Raccoon City, which was about to be razed to the ground. Firearms are used to deal with biological and chemical weapons, and food and water are prepared for escaping from Raccoon City. Raccoon City, originally just a small border town, was selected by Umbrella Corporation for a huge investment in modernization because it was surrounded by mountains on three sides and only one side led to the outside world. Raccoon City has become an industrial city with a permanent population of over 100,000. In order to ensure the secrecy of biological and chemical virus experiments, Raccoon City is far away from other cities. If there is no food and water, Luo Guang cannot guarantee that he can support himself to walk to other human settlements. It would be too uncomfortable if he was not bitten to death by zombies but starved to death or died of thirst. Luo Guang is making the worst plan. Escaping from Raccoon City is just a small goal for Luo Guang now. There was food and water in the STARS safe house built by Brad, but because the goddess of vengeance came too quickly, and the shelf of food and water was in the opposite direction of the black escape door, but closer to another red door, Luo Guang had no time to get the food and water and hurriedly fled the safe house. When Jill decided to separate from him, Luo Guang was not going to persuade Jill. Luo Guang knew the danger of the goddess of vengeance, and few people around the protagonist were still alive. It was just that with Jill's help, Luo Guang obtained a lot of weapons and supplies. Out of gratitude, Luo Guang just wanted to remind Jill to leave Raccoon City as soon as possible. But the other party hurried to the safe house after speaking, and it seemed that he should go back to help Brad. In the context of the biochemical crisis, Luo Guang naturally would not do the kind of behavior of shouting, so naturally he could not say it, but Luo Guang no longer felt that he owed the other party a favor. Now, his original plan was half completed, and the remaining food and water were missing. Luo Guang thought so, and suddenly he remembered that he was still missing an important item for leaving Raccoon City, a map. Because Luo Guang did not inherit the memory of the umbrella employee who was also called Luo Guang when he came to this world, Luo Guang had no idea about the terrain and buildings of Raccoon City. Because he did not inherit the memory, even when he met Jill, Luo Guang could not help but be grateful for the 9 years of compulsory education he had received, which allowed him to communicate with the other party in English. Back to the plan. In order to find supplies and leave Raccoon City, Luo Guang added a new priority goal to his plan, which was to find a map of Raccoon City. Unlike the world where Luo Guang originally lived, where everyone had a mobile phone and could open the navigation anytime and anywhere, Luo Guang in this era could only find a paper version of the map. Of course, there are some electronic map devices, but obviously those things have not been popularized in this era. Maybe there may be some in Umbrella, but Luo Guang at this time did not know where to find Umbrella's facilities. Therefore, considering that local people basically do not have local city maps, Luo Guang set his sights on public facilities or administrative facilities, which may have tourist maps of Raccoon City. As a second choice, Luo Guang can also go to the subway station to see if he can determine the direction and location based on the route map in the subway station. At this time, Luo Guang had no map, so he could only find his destination based on the road signs on the side of the road. After leaving the alley, Luo Guang had only one road sign in his sight, and the information written on it, RPD Youth Activity Center, was exactly what Luo Guang needed. Judging from the size of the road sign, there should be a place name, but it has been covered by black and red liquid. RPD is the abbreviation of the Raccoon Police Department. The RPD Youth Activity Center should be a public facility similar to the Children's Palace, so there might be some supplies there. Luo Guang thought so, but at this time, under the road sign, the road to the RPD Youth Activity Center was blocked by dozens of zombies. If he used a pistol, Luo Guang was still confident that he could handle it, but now Luo Guang was a little nostalgic for the fire axe that he dropped. That thing could split a person's head in one go. As long as he controlled the distance and split the one-to-many situation into multiple one-to-one situations, it would be good to use the fire axe to deal with this situation. After all, the attack distance was much farther than the telescopic dagger in his hand, which was more conducive to Luo Guang pulling the zombies and defeating them one by one. This chapter is not over yet, please click on the next page to continue reading. Fortunately, when Luo Guang came to this Raccoon City, it was already September 28th. After the blasting operation under the command of the Deputy Director on September 24th, a large number of zombies attracted by the sound were concentrated and eliminated, which made the streets of Raccoon City not so crowded now. Otherwise, Luo Guang would definitely not have the idea of fighting the zombies who were good at human wave tactics. According to the road sign, turn right at the intersection in front of you and enter Huaja. The RPD Youth Activity Center should be nearby, so if you want to get to the RPD Youth Activity Center as soon as possible, you have to fight these zombies first. But if Luo Guang chooses to fight with dozens of zombies in front of him, it will take a lot of time, and it is hard to say what will happen during this period. In addition, Jill's fight in the alley is still going on. Luo Guang thinks he must get away from here as soon as possible to avoid being involved. Luo Guang looked around and found that there was an alley on the other side of the road, which led to the direction roughly consistent with the direction of the RPD Youth Activity Center. Soon, Luo Guang made a decision in his mind and took action immediately. He crossed the road in a few steps and flashed into the alley. The fire did not spread in the alley. Garbage was everywhere, but there was no buzzing of flies. Compared with the mixed sounds on the street, the alley was very quiet, just like the Raccoon City before the biochemical crisis broke out, quiet and full of crime. Luo Guang held the telescopic dagger in his left hand at a right angle in front of his body, and held the G17 pistol with only one magazine in his right hand on his left wrist. At the STARS safe house, Luo Guang only had time to pick up the loaded G17 pistol and a box of 9mm bullets. The box was full and Luo Guang had stuffed it into his backpack. The G17 pistol Brad chose was indeed suitable for Luo Guang's Asian hand shape. Without adjusting the grip of the gun, Luo Guang's palm could fit the grip of the gun very well. However, the barrel of this G17 pistol was short, which made Luo Guang worry that it was not powerful enough to penetrate the zombies whose skulls had not yet softened. There were still street lights in the alley, emitting a faint light, but it finally allowed Luo Guang to see things clearly. The system also mentioned at the right time that it had a way to improve Luo Guang's photosensitivity, allowing him to see clearly like a cat in darker places, but Luo Guang was worried that the explosion or other reasons would cause the sudden strong light to hurt his eyes, so he temporarily refused the system's help. Walking lightly, sticking to the wall on the left, after passing a large trash can on the right, Luo Guang suddenly turned right and aimed his pistol at the side of the large trash can. This was Luo Guang's blind spot. In addition, Luo Guang also noticed the black and red traces of blood flowing on the ground, so he was prepared. What Luo Guang saw was a half-dead body. The badge with the 3 words RPD on the arm of his clothes was very conspicuous. It was a policeman from the Raccoon City Police Department. Luo Guang frowned, both for the pity of the police's experience and for his inability to determine what biological and chemical weapons caused such damage. Only half of the body was left in front of him, as if it had been torn apart by a huge force, but Luo Guang did not see any traces around, no claw marks, no marks of beating, etc. Luo Guang exhaled a foul breath. In the absence of gloves and poles, for hygiene reasons, Luo Guang still did not consider touching the body to see if there were any weapons or bullets. The body had no weapons in its hands, and the police belt flew away. It was just that the death of the body made Luo Guang feel uneasy. The unknown was the most terrifying. Luo Guang was about to leave this place of trouble, and suddenly something flashed in his peripheral vision. Being alert to the sudden mutation of the body, Luo Guang just moved a little closer. It was a key, lying quietly next to the body. Without thinking too much, or some kind of instinct to pick up the props when seeing them, Luo Guang quickly reached out to pick up the key, and then quickly pulled away from the body. The body did not suddenly jump up, which made Luo Guang feel relieved. After reflecting on his careless behavior just now, Luo Guang looked at the key in his hand. There was no sign or car logo on it. Luo Guang didn't know what the key was for, but after all, he got it from the police, and the RPD Youth Activity Center he was going to was also connected to the police, so Luo Guang decided to take the key with him. After calming down, Luo Guang walked a few steps forward and came to a T-shaped intersection. According to the location of the RPD Youth Activity Center, Luo Guang had to turn left. He dodged and looked at the alleys on both sides. There were zombies guarding the road, but the number was much less than on the road. In the case of facing the enemy on one side, Luo Guang could still solve the enemy by pulling, but because there were enemies on both sides, Luo Guang had to keep an eye on the zombies wandering aimlessly in the alleys on the other side. After checking the items on his body again, Luo Guang switched the weapons in his left and right hands. He held the telescopic dagger in his right hand and moved his wrist. When the zombie in the left alley closest to him turned his back to Luo Guang rushed out. There were a lot of debris on the ground, such as discarded paper, so instead of keeping an eye on the situation under his feet and walking behind the zombies, Luo Guang chose to sprint more directly. When the nearest zombie heard the footsteps and turned his head, a telescopic dagger was accurately inserted into the zombie's eye socket. As before, he turned the dagger to ensure that the zombie's brain was destroyed before pulling it out. This chapter is not over yet, please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. Without stopping, while the first zombie was still falling, Luo Guang had already chosen the next target. He kicked the zombie on the left to the zombie behind him, and then the reaction force leaned back to avoid the zombie rushing from the right. At the same time, the retracted foot attacked again, crossing the attack path of the zombie on the right, and tripped the zombie on the right to the ground. After stepping hard on the spine of the zombie on the right, Luo Guang took a few steps forward, stepped on the zombie that was still struggling to get up, and used his right hand twice to kill the two zombies. Luo Guang thought about it, turned around and finished off the zombie whose spine was broken by Luo Guang, while observing the zombies in the alley on the other side with his peripheral vision. Perhaps because the alley was narrow and the tall walls on both sides allowed the sound to spread farther, the zombies in the alley on the other side noticed the situation on Luo Guang's side and were walking towards Luo Guang with staggering steps. After confirming that the zombies on the other side would not pose a threat to him, Luo Guang was about to walk out of the alley along the road. Adapter, the destination is on the right. Luo Guang walked to a T-shaped intersection again, went straight and turned right, and suddenly heard the voice of the system in his mind, saying something similar to the navigation voice, and was slightly stunned. With the system's reminder, Luo Guang saw a signpost for the RPD Youth Activity Center on the wall of the alley where he turned right. This sign appeared in Luo Guang's peripheral vision, but Luo Guang did not notice it. Instead, the careful system noticed the sign and knew that Luo Guang was planning to leave the alley, so it reminded him. Thank you. As a polite, civilized, and new-style person, Luo Guang thanked the system and turned right into the alley on the other side. This alley is much wider than the previous one, and there is no debris on both sides, so it can accommodate a car. To Luo Guang's surprise, unlike his impression that the Children's Palace is always on the side of the road, the RPD Youth Activity Center is actually surrounded by other buildings. Unlike the other weak street lights in the alley, there are two bright wall lamps at the entrance of the RPD Youth Activity Center, which made Luo Guang notice the building at once. Looking at the sign above the closed door that read RPD Youth Activity Center, Luo Guang nodded silently. We have arrived. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 5. Luo Guang did not rush in, but observed the surroundings to get more information. There was no blood or corpses on the roads or walls around, and no shells were scattered on the ground. It seemed that there had been no fighting at the door. Luo Guang inferred that after the disaster, no one came here to avoid zombies, or to be conservative, this place had not been attacked by zombies. However, this was only the situation outside. It was possible that the RPD Youth Activity Center was already a purgatory, so Luo Guang did not let down his guard easily, but tried to push the door open more carefully. As expected, it could not be pushed open, and the door was tightened. At this time, Luo Guang thought of the key he had picked up before. With the mood of trying it out, Luo Guang changed the weapons in his left and right hands again. He held the telescopic dagger with his middle finger, ring finger, and little finger of his left hand, and inserted the key with his index finger and thumb into the keyhole of the door. The size fits, but Luo Guang did not turn the key immediately. He put his right hand holding the gun close to his waist, slightly away from the door, turned right about 30 degrees and aimed the muzzle of the pistol at the gap that was about to open. This action was not taught by the system, but Luo Guang learned it from watching movies and TV series. After watching the movie, Luo Guang also checked the authenticity and practicality of this action. Putting the pistol back close to the waist is to prevent the extended pistol from being taken away by others. In close range, the pistol close to the waist can also remain stable and give close enemies enough blows. Because the pistol is close to the waist, Luo Guang's action is not to prevent zombies, but humans, so there is no need to aim at the head. After getting ready, Luo Guang slowly turned the key. With a click, the lock of the door was opened by Luo Guang. Before pushing the door open, Luo Guang listened to the sound first, and after confirming that there were no other sounds behind the door and around, he gently pushed open the door of the RPD Youth Activity Center. The building was still quiet, with only the creaking sound of the door being pushed. Luo Guang did not rush in, but aimed his gun along the view revealed by the door. There might be people, but no zombies, Luo Guang judged in his heart based on what he saw. The house was brightly lit, so someone must have come to open it. That person might still be hiding in the building. The reason why the lights were not turned off was that humans needed more light than zombies, which meant that the lights were only for zombies. Otherwise, if a dark place suddenly became bright, it would distract people instantly and they would not be able to respond to the attack immediately. At the same time, Luo Guang looked all the way and found that there were no signs of fighting, just like outside. For the time being, it can be confirmed that this place has not been attacked by zombies. The hall is basically safe. Luo Guang did not relax his vigilance, and quickly slipped in, turned his body 180 degrees, and aimed his gun behind the door. Safe. After Luo Guang confirmed that it was safe, he took out the key to the door and slipped into the building. Because he had developed a good habit, Luo Guang habitually locked the door. Luo Guang came to the front desk of the RPD Youth Activity Center. When he scanned the front desk to see if there were any maps or other useful materials, he suddenly heard a sound like glass breaking. Luo Guang immediately became alert. Although the world is not the end of the world and human morality has not collapsed, people are also good and bad. Who in Raccoon City at this time says that zombies must be more terrible than humans? Don't forget that this biochemical crisis is a man-made disaster. Luo Guang, who has been influenced by major games, movies, and novels, naturally has a deep understanding of the true teachings. At this moment, he is not excited about meeting possible survivors. Speaking of which, it is better to meet the protagonists. At least most of them are great and glorious characters. Luo Guang thought to himself, pointing his gun in the direction of the sound, listening to the movement vigilantly. The hall was quiet again. Luo Guang kept his composure and did not easily think that it was a mouse hitting the glass and falling to the ground to make a sound. To be honest, unless the mouse was panicking, Luo Guang had never seen many times that mice knocked things down since he was a child. At this moment, this situation is too coincidental, so Luo Guang will not let down his guard. The other party made a noise and lost the initiative, but Luo Guang was not familiar with this place, so he chose a corner position, hid behind the pillar, and showed half of his body to aim at the passage in the direction of the sound. Perhaps because he was exposed and fell into silence, which made him feel uneasy, the other party was the first to lose his temper. Not long after, Luo Guang heard the sound of the door opening, and then a sound rang out. Frank. The voice was a bit far away, and Luo Guang could not hear it clearly. He didn't know whether it was a man or a woman, and could only barely hear that it was a person's name. Frank. Luo Guang thought of the half-corpse. The corpse held the key here. It was indeed very likely that he knew the people here, and then he needed to leave temporarily to find support or for other things, and finally lost his life. After thinking about it, the other party did not seem to have any malicious intentions. Instead, he was in a passive defensive state, so Luo Guang aimed at the passage where the sound came from and walked slowly. Anyone here? Luo Guang didn't want to be shot dead by others as a zombie, so he replied. The other party did not respond immediately, but instead closed the door as his first reaction. Who is it? The voice was even less clear through the door. Fortunately, Luo Guang had already walked into the passage and did not miss the sound. This chapter is not finished yet, please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. Survivor Luo Guang felt that no identity was more suitable than this word at this time. The other party's situation should be the same as his own. Luo Guang's words will make the other party feel that Luo Guang is in the same position as himself, which can better shorten the distance between the two parties. Why do you have the key to this place? The other party was still asking, maybe because they were in the house and worried that Luo Guang couldn't hear clearly, so the other party turned up the volume a little more. It's just that the sound insulation in the room is pretty good. As for the sounds Luo Guang heard outside the room, they were still relatively quiet and he needed to listen carefully. Unknowingly, Luo Guang had touched the door outside the room where the other party was hiding. The other party spoke again and Luo Guang immediately found the room. There was a police officer who was injured and died. In order to make the other party think that Luo Guang was not approaching, Luo Guang spoke in a slightly lower voice. Before Luo Guang finished speaking, the other party opened the door. As soon as he came out, he bumped into Luo Guang, who was waiting at the door. Luo Guang had quick eyes and quick hands, and as if by coincidence, he hit the opponent's right wrist with his hand, knocking the pistol off the opponent's hand and falling to the ground. Luo Guang did not bend down to pick up the opponent's pistol and point it at the opponent. Instead, he stood and pointed his own pistol at the opponent intentionally or unintentionally. He probably hit his head. The other person covered his head with one hand and supported the ground with the other. He looked up at Luo Guang with a nervous look on his face. He caught sight of the pistol pointed at him. He was about to raise his pistol when he realized that he was holding it in his hand. Already empty. Do you know the policeman who died? Luo Guang saw the other person looking at him with nervousness and fear. He knew that the other person was frightened by him, but Luo Guang did not threaten him. The two sides were not considered enemies at this time, so Luo Guang first mentioned what the other party cared about and asked. When the other party heard Luo Guang's question, a trace of anxiety and sadness flashed across his nervous face, and he replied, "He is my brother. Please forgive me, and please understand my caution." Luo Guang put away his weapon. Since the other party did not seem malicious or threatening, Luo Guang picked up the other party's pistol, but did not reach out to pull the other party up. The other party looked at his pistol and was about to say something when Luo Guang said first, "Your gun belongs to your brother, right?" After Luo Guang picked up the gun, he took a closer look. The model was similar to his own gun. The information given by the system was Beretta 92FS, which is an improved version of the M92F pistol in Luo Guang's hand. The other party's gun was engraved with the initials F.K. Considering the relationship between the other party and the police, he guessed that it was a weapon given to her by her brother for self-defense. Although it may be fake, Luo Guang thought that if the other party's first sound was frank, Luo Guang did not speak at that time, so there was no point in the other party's acting for the zombies. On the contrary, it would attract the zombies and expose them at the same time. Own position. Coupled with the fact that the other party rushed out unprepared after hearing that the police officer was injured, Luo Guang's suspicion was dispelled. "Yes," the other party replied cautiously. Luo Guang, who looked at the other party, thought for a moment, turned off the safety, and handed the gun to the other party. Perhaps because of the shock of losing a loved one, the other person's face was still filled with sadness. He was even more cautious when he took the gun handed over by Luo Guang, and then held the gun in his arms. If this is a performance, he is also a ruthless person who can win awards. Luo Guang thought in his heart. He did not remove the gun in his hand, but said this, "My name is Luo Guang. I am here to find someone Raccoon City maps and other supplies. My name is Lin." After the other party said her name, she hugged the pistol her brother gave her tightly, and then asked, "Did my brother say anything at the end? How was he injured?" "I don't know how he was injured." Luo Guang seemed to be recalling the situation at that time. He paused, but in the end he thought it was better not to tell her about her brother's death and continued. He finally turned the key tremblingly. "Just tell me about the youth center and leave." Really, Lin was not asking rhetorically, nor was she questioning Luo Guang's statement. She just couldn't help but recall her brother, and tears welled up in the corners of her eyes. "Are you the only one here?" Luo Guang frowned. If the girl in front of him couldn't cheer up, she would be fatal in this hell. "Yes, my brother took me here not long after those monsters appeared in large numbers, and then he went out to look for rescue." The other party didn't finish his words and was a little choked with sobs. Is there a map of Raccoon City here? Luo Guang did not comfort him immediately. The other party nodded and told Luo Guang where the map was. Looking at the girl who was still sobbing, Luo Guang sighed and encouraged, "Your brother left to protect you. You should live well, so that you don't live up to your brother." Luo Guang did not turn his back to Lin, but looked at her and walked backwards. The map was in the drawer at the front desk. This reminded Lin that when her brother went to search for rescue, he looked at him with reluctance, worried about her, and finally left slowly. Lin knew in her heart that Luo Guang was not her brother, but she still moved her feet unconsciously, and couldn't help shouting the words that her brother didn't shout when he left, "Don't leave me." Luo Guang stopped when he heard the other party's words, nodded and motioned for the other party to follow. The two walked back to the front desk side by side. Before Luo Guang could say anything, he opened a drawer on the right side of the front desk and took out the map. The map was still new. Under the light, Luo Guang found the way out in no time. Lin saw where Luo Guang's finger was and asked, "Luo, are you looking for a way to leave Raccoon City?" Yes, Luo Guang did not deny this. It would be better if the other party had the same idea as him, which meant that both parties had common interests. It was not as credible as common interests for two strangers to talk about love at first sight. The highways and ordinary intercity roads were either blocked by cars or blocked by regulations. My brother originally planned to take me out of Raccoon City and then come back here for support. Lin did not finish her words, but Luo Guang knew that she meant that the two of them had to return to Raccoon City to hide and seek support because of this. Noticing a word in Lin's words, Luo Guang asked, "Control? Is it the military?" Lin wiped her tears and said, "It should be the National Guard. They received military orders to control the scale of the disaster and wait for the arrival of the regular army. Because they didn't know how those monsters appeared, the National Guard didn't dare to let us leave, but let us return home temporarily and wait for the situation to calm down. Later, because the city council had no news after a speech, my brother thought about whether he could leave through the police. Then can only take the railway or the air route." Luo Guang directly abandoned the plan of taking the 11th route and riding a two-wheeled vehicle, and said in a low voice. Although Luo Guang didn't know the plot of the biochemical crisis by heart, he always had some impression that the main group basically left by these two methods. Didn't a middle-parted man and a female college student drive into Raccoon City? Some people may say so, but that was the way into the city. The two took advantage of the gap between the military blockade to enter the city. Luo Guang and his companions needed to leave Raccoon City. If they found a car to go in the opposite direction, they might not even be able to leave the city. Luo Guang did not want to gamble whether he could find a usable car after reaching the outskirts of Raccoon City. "The subway has a route that goes directly outside," Lin said on the side. "Yes, but the subway train on that route is a death train." Luo Guang thought so in his heart, but it was difficult to say it directly. However, he understood that the reason why the subway train was destroyed was because it carried Jill, who was being tracked by the goddess of vengeance. What if Jill did not get on the train in the end? Luo Guang suddenly wanted to try to see how big a storm this little butterfly could stir up in this Raccoon City. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 6. Let's give it a try with some calculations in mind, Luo Guang whispered to himself. Luo, what did you just say? Lin saw Luo Guang's mouth move, but she didn't understand what Luo Guang said. Nothing. Luo Guang's words to himself just now were spoken in Chinese, and this time he spoke back to English. Then let's go to the subway station to have a look. Luo Guang's finger moved on the map and suddenly stopped at a place, Raccoon City Central Subway Station. This subway station is the closest to us, let's try our luck there. Lin nodded and didn't object. Luo Guang glanced at Lin, who was here obediently following his brother's advice, and now wanted to leave. From Lin's perspective, it was not because she had no feelings for her brother, and her previous tears were not fake. Her brother had passed away, and if she hid here, she would not be rescued anyway. Lin had heard the announcement of the city council, but she would not believe a word of that announcement. And the city council did not issue any more announcements afterwards, which made Lin believe that the Raccoon City government was unable to solve this disaster, so she could only save herself. Lin didn't disobey her brother, but this time, it was Lin who walked in front and survived with her brother. Luo Guang watched Lin hug the pistol her brother left her with a little force, and suddenly thought of something. Luo Guang then asked, "Can you use a gun?" "My brother taught me, I can use it, but my accuracy is not very good." Lin made it clear that you can't count on her to shoot. Unless it's an emergency, it's better not to use a gun. Those zombies have good hearing. Their combat effectiveness is not strong individually, but it's not easy to deal with them in large numbers. Luo Guang told Lin some of his own experience. Although Lin couldn't compare with Jill in terms of strength or combat skills, as long as the method was appropriate, simple one-on-one combat was still easy to learn. Having said that, Luo Guang didn't expect the other party to provide much combat effectiveness. It would be good if he could provide some other help without dragging his feet. After all, technical talents will always have a place to use their skills. Okay, Lin nodded obediently and asked, "Are we ready to go?" "Luo, do you want to take a break first? I think it's safe here for the time being. Are there any supplies? Weapons, food, water, etc." Luo Guang remembered his original plan. This time, there was no goddess of vengeance to disrupt the situation, and Luo Guang obtained supplies very smoothly. Under the leadership of Lin, he smashed a vending machine that was out of power and harvested a table of food and drinking water. There was no room for more, so Luo Guang chose to eat 60% full with Lin first to digest some of the food that could not be taken away, and then selectively put the food and drinking water on the table into their respective backpacks and shoulder bags. Lin's shoulder bag was sky blue. Luo Guang originally advised Lin to change to a backpack with a larger capacity that would not swing around if she had the chance in the future. But after hearing Lin say that this backpack was a birthday gift from her brother, Luo Guang fell silent and stopped persuading her. He just asked Lin to adjust the tightness of the shoulder strap of the shoulder bag to at least ensure that it would not affect her escape and not sway left and right when she ran. "Although I have come to this dangerous place, I still can't be as cold and ruthless as the people in the end times." Looking at Lin, who was adjusting the shoulder strap of the shoulder bag in front of him, Luo Guang thought so. It has not been long since Luo Guang came to this world, and he still has the Sanyeo style of the peacetime era, so he did not have the idea of abandoning the other party. However, since they met, he has maintained a certain degree of caution and vigilance. "After all, I just said that her brother gave me the key. So it seems that it was not her brother who asked me to take care of her? I was just making up a lie." Luo Guang, who was in a dilemma, looked at Lin, who was adjusting the tightness of the shoulder strap, and found an excuse for his behavior. It is easy to feel sleepy after eating, and it is not suitable for exercise. After resting for a while, the two began to act. Leaving the RPD Youth Activity Center, the two walked side by side. Luo Guang did not choose to walk in front to protect Lin, but kept a short distance from Lin, showing a mutual cover, and also to take the other's actions into consideration. Neither of them had received professional training, so the movements and formations did not look professional, but this was the best solution the system gave Luo Guang. Whether it was to rescue the other party or abandon the other party, the system made an analysis plan for Luo Guang. In fact, the system judged that Lin was a burden who had no combat power and could not keep up with Luo Guang's pace. When Luo Guang was resting, it suggested that Luo Guang act alone, which was better than teaming up with a burden. When Luo Guang rejected the system, he said, "Because the other party has a brother who is a policeman, he has been trained in normal times and is not as weak as he looks. The system can only quantify the ability of Luo Guang as the host, but it can only see and judge other people through Luo Guang's eyes, so it can only confirm a rough range. During the meal, Luo Guang brought up the Chinese dinner table culture and talked to Lin about many things, including the influence of her brother on her. Therefore, in addition to daily exercise, Lin is also studying medicine and has certain medical knowledge. It is true that being bitten by a zombie will cause mutation, which makes the existing medical knowledge a bit useless when facing zombies. But Luo Guang obviously thought of more. There are car accident sites and explosion sites everywhere in Raccoon City. It can be said that the environment has become bad. It is possible to be accidentally scratched by exposed sharp objects while walking. The trust between people has not been completely destroyed, but there are still people who want to make trouble, and there is also the possibility of knife and gun and bullet injuries. This chapter is not over yet. Please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. Having a quasi-doctor can make people feel more at ease, Luo Guang persuaded. Lin was talking most of the time during the meal, and Luo Guang was also happy to be a good listener, which could avoid leaking his own information while obtaining the other party's information. Finally, after Luo Guang rejected the system's suggestion to use Lin as a shield, the system had no choice but to make plans based on Luo Guang's decision. Back to Luo Guang and the other person. At this time, the two had left the alley and came to the street, hiding on both sides of the same scrapped car. Just like what Luo Guang saw before, it was still the same purgatory-like scene on Earth. Luo Guang adapted to it quickly, and even did not feel disgusted at all, which made Luo Guang wonder if he was a cold-blooded animal. Luo Guang didn't know that this was actually all due to the system adjustment, but the system didn't tell Luo Guang about this, and it didn't always turn on this ability, so Luo Guang didn't find anything strange. Luo Guang, who didn't know this, took a look at Lin's situation. Lin frowned and covered her mouth and nose with one hand, seeming to be a little nauseous, but in the end she didn't have any intense reaction. After more than 10 seconds, although Lin still looked uncomfortable, she finally adjusted herself and stopped covering her mouth and nose with her hands. Such performance made Luo Guang change his opinion of this girl who always looked like she was about to cry. Lin saw Luo Guang looking at her, shook her head, and made a gesture she had just learned: forward. Forward, stop, retreat. These were the gestures that Luo Guang had to learn temporarily, and Lin had been exposed to them before because of her brother, so she learned them quickly. However, Luo Guang took into account the situation of the two, so he only chose these 3 simple and useful gestures. Luo Guang nodded and checked the situation behind and on both sides again. There were no zombies on the left and right sides, but there were zombies in the back, and there were quite a few of them, but they were blocked by 3 vehicles that collided and caught fire. I don't know if there was still some instinct. The zombies on the other side were slightly away from the flames. Luo Guang turned his sight to the front again. At this time, a group of zombies were sitting together in the middle of the main road in front of them, eating, pulling, tearing, and fighting with their hands. There were passages on both sides that could be passed, but they were relatively narrow. Isn't this the standard forced split action? Luo Guang saw at a glance that if the situation was in the game, it would be the kind of environment that would cause trouble. It is also feasible for the two to walk on one side at the same time, but Luo Guang was worried that if there were zombies ambushing in front to attack, it would be difficult to avoid it with someone behind him. In addition, Luo Guang had always wanted to avoid showing his back to Lin, whom he had just met. As for letting Lin walk in front, Luo Guang couldn't do it. The relationship between the two was not that of a superior and subordinate relationship, so Luo Guang couldn't force Lin to walk in front to open the way. Let's go around separately. Lin squatted carefully and walked to Luo Guang's side, whispering, "This flag." Luo Guang was a little speechless for a while, and couldn't help thinking that the people he saw along the way were like NPCs, and they would not do anything that was not dangerous, just like Jill went back to PK with the Goddess of Vengeance, which was a little difficult for Luo Guang, who had seen many horror movies, to understand. However, Lin's suggestion was not bad for Luo Guang. Anyway, his initial supply plan had been completed, and it would not be so embarrassing for the other party to speak up. Thinking so in his heart, Luo Guang's face was hesitant. His face was tangled for a while, and finally nodded and said, "Be careful." After that, the two did not communicate more and started to act. Luo Guang's side was very smooth, and the accident was naturally on Lin's side. Just as Lin was carefully avoiding the scattered car parts on the ground, a zombie hiding under the car suddenly reached out and grabbed Lin's feet that were about to land. Because Lin was paying attention to the situation on the ground, she reacted quickly. She kicked her back foot and stepped forward a short distance, successfully avoiding the grab. However, after landing, because of the excessive force, Lin's body swayed, and her palm slapped on the car door. I don't know if it was because the car was thin, but the sound was unexpectedly loud. As if time had stopped, Luo Guang and Lin stopped moving. The zombies who were eating and drinking were interrupted. They received the signal for a meal, swayed and stood up, instinctively followed the direction of the sound, and looked in the direction of Lin with their white eyes. Seeing that the zombies were attracted by Lin, Luo Guang did not speak, but observed the other party's reaction. Lin saw many zombies looking at her, and her heart tightened and she was stunned. "Damn it," Luo Guang cursed in a low voice. "Run, gather at the subway station." After Luo Guang shouted at Lin, he was considered to have done his best and ran away. After Luo Guang's loud roar, Lin finally woke up from her fear. Looking at the zombies that were attracted by Luo Guang's roar, she realized that she had implicated Luo Guang. Because the road conditions were bad, Luo Guang focused all his attention on his feet and did not look back to confirm the situation. However, he vaguely heard Lin's response, probably because the other party was no longer standing still and started to run for his life. As long as they were not surrounded, most types of zombies were relatively easy to deal with. Lin was in a position where there was a car blocking the zombies eating in the middle of the road, so Lin had a good chance of escaping successfully. Luo Guang did not get too entangled with the zombies. He kicked the zombies blocking the road to the side. Without giving them any extra sight, Luo Guang bent down to avoid the zombies waving hands and past the zombies. The alley on the right, the system that recorded the map of Raccoon City through Luo Guang's eyes, navigated for Luo Guang. Luo Guang did not slow down. He turned right, avoided the attack from the front, and ran into an alley. Maybe it was because the main road was more lively, Luo Guang found that there were always very few zombies in the alley. Without encountering many obstacles, after climbing over a wall, Luo Guang completely got rid of the zombies chasing him. If it was the traffic era before the time travel, this part of mine would have been included in a parkour collection and gained a lot of fans. Seeing that he had gotten rid of the enemy and there were no zombies ambushing him after he climbed over the wall, Luo Guang relaxed his tense nerves a little and his mind wandered off. Just when Luo Guang wanted to take a break while he was temporarily safe, a huge sound suddenly sounded, and Luo Guang vaguely heard a familiar shouting and cursing. Luo Guang took the G17 pistol and carefully left the alley where he was. As soon as he got out of the alley, he saw a pretty lady in a blue tube top rolling on the ground with a gray face. Luo, after rolling a few times and coughing a few times, Jill, who was about to get up, saw Luo Guang and was a little surprised. When Luo Guang was about to reply, he was interrupted by a roar without giving face. This time Luo Guang heard the meaning of the roar very clearly. S.T.A.R.S. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 7. S.T.A.R.S. Just as Luo Guang expected, the target of the tyrant named Goddess of Vengeance is the members of the STARS team who participated in the mansion incident. And because most of the STARS members who survived the mansion incident have left Raccoon City, the first to bear the brunt are naturally Jill and Brad, who have stayed in Raccoon City to secretly investigate Umbrella Corporation after the mansion incident. In addition to killing people to silence them, the members of the STARS team who once defeated the mansion tyrant are the best test subjects for the Goddess of Vengeance developed by the European branch. This is an opportunity for the researchers of the European branch of Umbrella Corporation to prove that they are more powerful and reliable than William Birkin and Albert Wesker of the American Arclay Research Institute. Perhaps because Jill called Luo Guang, the Goddess of Vengeance directly identified Luo Guang as Jill's teammate, so her eyes flashed and included Luo Guang in the attack. The Goddess of Vengeance stretched out her left hand, which had turned into a cluster of tentacles, and the tentacles shot at Luo Guang and Jill like spears. Luo Guang, who had originally planned to pretend to be scared and run to the side to watch the show and did not want to take action to avoid being attacked, cursed. While Luo Guang's cry of hum was still echoing in the air, Luo Guang had already rolled over and avoided the Goddess of Vengeance's quick attack. Then Luo Guang, who was about to squat and counterattack, leaned to his side involuntarily and fell to the ground, barely avoiding the sweep of the Goddess of Vengeance's tentacles that had just stabbed out. Thank you. Luo Guang knew that it was the system that helped him, causing his body to suddenly lose balance, so that he was lucky to avoid this attack. Although Jill was knocked away by the Goddess of Vengeance's attack and rolled several times, he seemed to be still alive and well to fight back, but Luo Guang did not want to try how strong the Goddess of Vengeance's attack was. The Goddess of Vengeance wanted to deal with the seemingly weaker Luo Guang first, and bring the situation back to a one-on-one with Jill. Because the tentacles swept towards Luo Guang, Jill found the opportunity to counterattack after dodging the attack. He fired several shots in a row and shot the bullets at the ugly face of the Goddess of Vengeance. Because the Goddess of Vengeance looked at Luo Guang, Jill's bullets did not hit the relatively soft eyes of the Goddess of Vengeance, so Jill's counterattack only struck the head of the Goddess of Vengeance, making a clanging sound. However, Jill's attack still successfully attracted the attention of the Goddess of Vengeance. After all, in the eyes of the Goddess of Vengeance, Jill's danger level is much higher than Luo Guang. When the Goddess of Vengeance was attracted by Jill's attack, Luo Guang immediately climbed up from the ground to avoid being passive. Because the Goddess of Vengeance attacked Luo Guang naturally didn't care about other things, or how to explain to the people of Umbrella later, and also shot the other party with his small pistol. As long as he was included in the hunting list, Luo Guang had to endure the pursuit of the Goddess of Vengeance. It seems that the Goddess of Vengeance is only hunting down the two people from STARS. That's because the people from STARS are the main targets of the Goddess of Vengeance, and those secondary targets that block the way, such as Luo Guang, have long been crushed by the Goddess of Vengeance. Although Luo Guang is nominally an intelligence officer of Umbrella Corporation, Luo Guang knows that those damn European branch researchers will not do anything after learning about such a situation, but will mock Luo Guang for being involved in it and will not hide from their own masterpiece. Indeed, if Luo Guang hides in the alley, the Goddess of Vengeance will not include Luo Guang in the hunting target, but that alley is a dead end, and there are already many zombies gathered on the other side of the wall, so Luo Guang must walk out of the alley to stay active, instead of falling into a passive state and praying that the battle between Jill and the Avengers will not affect him. Let's talk about the battle. Because Luo Guang was not used to using guns, and he had fired only a few times since he traveled through time, his shooting skills were very poor compared to Jill or ordinary policemen. At a distance of less than 20 meters, Luo Guang's 4 shots still missed the target, and the other 3 shots hit the bulletproof restraints on the body of the Goddess of Vengeance, tickling her. Luo Guang was actually aiming at the head of the Goddess of Vengeance. The Goddess of Vengeance had a good brain, and instantly analyzed the more threatening party from Jill and Luo Guang's respective shots, and retracted the tentacles and shot again, but this time the target was all on Jill. The Goddess of Vengeance lowered Luo Guang's threat to the lowest level. Jill dodged to the side, but because there were more tentacles this time than before, the G-18 pistol in her hand was hit, and then the Goddess of Vengeance hit it hard, smashing it to pieces. Jill didn't have time to let her miss the sacrificed pistol. A shotgun was pulled out from behind, and a word of madfuck was sprayed out with the sound of the shotgun. Bang. Click. Bang. Jill's target was not the main body of the Goddess of Vengeance, but 2 shots at the cluster of tentacles that stretched and gathered. Unlike the Goddess of Vengeance's hard head and bulletproof straitjacket, the tentacles were very soft and bulletproof to ensure their elasticity, so Jill broke nearly 1/3 of the tentacles in 2 shots, forcing the Goddess of Vengeance to quickly retract the tentacles. On the other side, Luo Guang asked the system to find the opponent's weaknesses while moving to the side, and Jill and the Goddess of Vengeance formed a pincer attack. Although the small pistol in Luo Guang's hand can only cause some damage to the enemy's head, as long as the opponent pays attention to protecting the weak point of the head, it can always play a certain containment role. It's just that there is no way to break the situation now. Although Luo Guang had been actively looking for a way to break the situation, he felt very puzzled at this time. He did not want to get involved in the story of the protagonist Tuan and others. As a result, he met Jill when he left the apartment. They were separated, but now Luo Guang bumped into the scene of the Goddess of Revenge and was about to be killed by this monster. Of course, giving me a rocket launcher with unlimited bullets is another matter. Luo Guang's thoughts triggered the system's reply, and the system replied, "This system does not support the redemption function." Luo Guang didn't reply, and fired 2 more shots in a ventive manner. This time, because the enemy focused all their attention on Jill, Luo Guang, who had already gotten up, could take a good posture to shoot. With his previous shooting experience, Luo Guang also had a new understanding of the recoil of the weapon in his hand. He relaxed his tense hands a little and no longer thought about using brute force to block the recoil. Thanks to Brad, the G-17 pistol suited him better than Luo Guang thought. After Luo Guang adjusted it, both shots hit the head of the Goddess of Revenge who was slowly approaching Jill. With a dooin sound, one of the bullets ricocheted, but the other bullet was lucky enough to be slightly embedded in it, which just interrupted the enemy's attack on Gil again, allowing Gil to find an opportunity to interrupt several of the enemy's tentacles. Just when Luo Guang and Jill were still cautiously entangled with the Goddess of Revenge, looking for an opportunity to escape, zombies began to appear around them. Luo Guang noticed this situation, but he had no good solution. Instead, the Goddess of Revenge took the lead in making a change. She retracted all the remaining tentacles and twisted them into a giant fist. She took a step back with her hind legs and squatted in a half-squat position. Take a starting position. Jill naturally saw the opponent's attack intentions and methods, and ran directly to the abandoned car aside. There was another oppressive roar. The Goddess of Vengeance protected her head with her right hand, raised her left fist high and rushed towards Jill. With a wave of her left fist, she swept an old Ford in front of her to the left. Gil, who was hiding behind another car, naturally saw this situation, but Gil also noticed that the Fury only observed his position before sprinting, and the right hand that had been protecting his head since then also blocked his sight. Seeing that the opponent did not remove his right arm to check his position again, Gil ran to the left and successfully avoided the opponent's heavy punch. Although they avoided the attack, the distance between the two people had shortened to 5 meters, and the surrounding zombies were gradually surrounding them. The situation took a turn for the worse. The Goddess of Revenge who was strolling in the courtyard ran away, which made it even more difficult for the two of them to escape. There were also zombies approaching behind Luo Guang. In order to avoid being surrounded, Luo Guang had no choice but to clean up the zombies behind him first, instead of helping Jill distract the Goddess of Revenge. However, although neither Gil nor Luo Guang had a way to break the situation, the person who broke the situation appeared. A rocket trailed smoke towards the Nemesis. The Nemesis, who was focusing on Jill, did not react and hit the rocket directly. Then she was caught in the explosion of the rocket. The nemesis was enveloped in flames. Still standing tall, it let out a terrifying roar. Luo Guang and Gil both noticed the situation and looked in the direction of the rocket. The person holding the rocket launcher was a man wearing military uniforms. He was wearing a tactical vest full of magazines, body armor, pants, knee pads, and combat boots. He was also carrying the latest M401 carbine behind his back. Seeing that the goddess of revenge was still standing, the man in military uniform did not hesitate and fired another rocket directly at the goddess of revenge. This time, the goddess of revenge finally stopped standing and knelt on the ground. There was no sound, only the sound of crackling and burning. UBCS. Luo Guang noticed the abbreviations on the armband of the other party. The Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service is Umbrella Corporation's private army and one of the victims of the Raccoon City biochemical weapons testing site. Luo Guang still has some impression of this army. One of the protagonists is from this army. "Are you okay?" The man immediately dropped the 4-pack rocket launcher, ran to Jill, and helped Jill up, who was squatting behind the car in a protective posture to prevent the impact of the explosion. As is the nature of a man, Luo Guang had no idea what the other party was doing. He just shouted a little anxiously, "The monster is not dead yet, keep firing." While shouting, Luo Guang walked around the goddess of revenge and met up with Jill. "That thing has no ammunition." The man looked at Luo Guang, replied helplessly, and then asked, "The monster is still alive? That guy wasn't even blown to pieces. How could he die so easily?" Luo Guang seemed to be deducing, and said, "The most common zombies have to be killed by killing them, let alone this monster. Indeed, that monster has rough skin and thick flesh." Based on his previous dealings with the goddess of vengeance, Jill couldn't help but agree with Luo Guang's statement. "Then you can only use this thing." The other party turned his head and gestured to the firearm he was carrying behind him, and said, "It's not powerful enough. If I don't crush this guy to dust, I'm still worried that he will be resurrected." Luo Guang shook his head, and his words were a little sure that the tyrant was not dead, which made Jill doubt Luo Guang's identity. Jill had encountered a similar terrifying monster in the mansion, the tyrant, so he knew about the bullet resistance of the similar goddess of vengeance, and understood that ordinary guns had limited damage to it. As Luo Guang said before, the goddess of vengeance was not blown apart, so with the tenacious vitality of the tyrant, the goddess of vengeance might be able to recover. This chapter is not over yet. Please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. However, if Luo Guang was a civilian, how could he be so afraid of the goddess of vengeance or know something about it? Once Jill doubted, his mind began to quickly recall the situation of their encounter. Luo Guang did not reveal his profession, but except that Luo Guang did not say much about himself, there seemed to be nothing strange about him, and he did not look like a member of Umbrella at all. "There's no time to reload your guns now, run away." Luo Guang looked at the still motionless goddess of vengeance and the zombies rushing around, and quickly added, "The zombies are coming." Luo Guang's words woke the man and Jill up from their dreams. Regardless of whether Luo Guang's words were correct or not, the first priority at this time was to leave here. Luo Guang naturally wanted to take advantage of the goddess of vengeance to kill her in one go while she was silent, but unfortunately the current conditions did not allow it. Without high-powered weapons, it would take a long time to kill the goddess of vengeance with just a few guns. The continuous appearance of zombies around also made Luo Guang worried that the goddess of vengeance would suddenly move, and the three of them would be unable to escape. Although Jill had some doubts about Luo Guang, judging from his performance during this period, the other party had no ill will towards him, and he was not like someone from Umbrella. After excluding the possibility of a lackey of Umbrella who was familiar with biological and chemical weapons, could it be a third party that he didn't know about? Hearing Luo Guang urging the two of them to leave quickly, Jill, who was thinking, did not object and nodded in agreement with Luo Guang's words. The man saw Jill and Luo Guang, and Jill, who was beautiful, agreed with Luo Guang's suggestion. He smiled at Jill frivolously and said, "Okay, follow me. Our troops have set up a small evacuation point at the subway station on Central Street. It's not far from here. Let's go there." Luo Guang also planned to go to the subway station to see what was going on. He nodded and followed the man. Jill also followed and walked at the end of the team. Because when the man turned around, Jill saw the name UBCS on the epaulet of the army on the man's right arm. Jill had found this name when he was investigating Umbrella Corporation. This is the abbreviation of the name of one of Umbrella Corporation's private armies. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 8. The man was a bit familiar, and he couldn't stop talking when he took Luo Guang and Jill to the Central Avenue subway station. The man called himself Carlos Oliveira, and he was indeed a soldier of the Umbrella Biohazard Emergency Response Team, responsible for heavy firepower support and rear alert in the team. Carlos had just joined the team not long ago, and was still a new recruit in UBCS, but Carlos himself had also experienced war. Not long after joining UBCS, he faced such a big scene in his first battle, which made him complain to Jill and Luo Guang a few words, but Carlos was still optimistic and showed off to Luo Guang how many civilians he had helped and saved. When Jill knew that Carlos was a private army of Umbrella, it could be said that instinctively, he instantly felt distrustful of Carlos, even though Carlos had just saved himself and Luo Guang. After taking another look at the unknown Luo Guang, who seemed to have no reaction to Carlos' identity, Jill finally put his suspicions in his heart, but he had more considerations before taking action. After all, Wesker, who betrayed back then, was a member of Umbrella Corporation. Google search Furtkin. Carlos felt a little bored when he saw that Jill and Luo Guang were not interested in his boasting, but considering the terrifying monsters they had encountered before, Carlos couldn't complain and started talking about things related to survival. "Our team has set up a temporary shelter at the subway station, and is organizing the survivors to leave the subway station, but the current situation is a bit difficult." Carlos knew that neither of them was interested in talking, so he didn't keep them in suspense and continued, "The subway at the subway station has lost power. Although there is an emergency power supply inside, the subway car is not working after the power outage in the main control room. According to the report of the reconnaissance team, it seems that there is a problem at the substation. I was assigned the task of contacting rescue, and I encountered you two being attacked by the monster." Carlos briefly explained his situation and added, "Since I met you two, I will take you back to a safe place." Carlos didn't seem to know Jill. He was indeed a UBCS recruit. He thought Luo Guang and the others were civilians and happened to encounter the monster he saw for the first time. After all, the purpose of our UBCS is to solve this terrible crisis. No matter what, I am proud of my behavior in this disaster. Carlos knew nothing about the affairs of Umbrella Corporation, so he was still very proud of his job. At least he did save civilians who were fleeing. However, this seemed to provoke Jill's nerves. When Jill heard Carlos say that his team was protecting civilians, he couldn't help but frowned. When he heard Carlos talk about the purpose of the establishment of UBCS and his pride, he finally couldn't help it. He lowered his voice and said angrily, like a volcano about to erupt, "This. Carlos, do you know how this disaster happened?" Seeing this, Luo Guang interrupted Jill in a slightly higher voice. Luo Guang didn't want the two to go their separate ways because of a quarrel. He wanted to follow Carlos directly to the Central Avenue subway station, but he didn't want to reduce Jill's favorability towards him. Jill was a person who would stick up for his friends. In this Raccoon City, as a teammate, he was more trustworthy than most people. Although Jill didn't say it, Carlos could still see the anger and suspicion on Jill's face. He looked at the angry Jill with a puzzled look. When he was about to say something, he was caught off guard by Luo Guang's question. After a moment of hesitation, he said, "We don't know either." The order we received was to go to Raccoon City to rescue the survivors and eliminate the terrible monsters as much as possible. Our troops even cooperated with RPD and the military to conduct several annihilation battles, but the effect was not very good. We couldn't stop the zombies from going south into the city center. Carlos wanted to tell Jill loudly that in those battles, many members of UBCS also sacrificed a lot. No matter what their purpose was in joining UBCS, they died to save Raccoon City. And Jill was also saved by UBCS himself. But in the end, Carlos' throat moved, but he still didn't say it. Although Carlos didn't say it, Jill saw from Carlos's expression when he turned his head that he was angry at Jill for insulting himself and his teammates. This should be the expression I had when I contradicted the director after the mansion incident. Jill was interrupted by Luo Guang and heard Carlos's uninformed remarks. Finally, she took a deep breath and suppressed the anger that surged up, but she still said with a thorny tone, "I don't mean to insult you and those teammates who died, but these are biochemical monsters created by Umbrella." "What?" Angry Carlos was shocked by Jill's words, and then said in disbelief, "Miss, you can't talk nonsense. Do you have any evidence?" After Jill said this, Carlos could understand why Jill felt angry and suspicious after knowing that she was UBCS, even though he had just saved her. Jill was speechless for a moment. She was secretly collecting evidence of Umbrella's crimes, but the evidence she collected had been burned in the apartment, and Jill didn't think that Carlos, as a new recruit, knew the information about the mansion incident. Carlos saw Jill's expression and knew that the other party had no evidence, but the other party's expression didn't look fake, so Carlos still said considerately, "It seems that Jill and our company have a lot of conflicts, but without evidence, it is hard to convince people that this Umbrella company will destroy the Raccoon City that it invested in and built." This chapter is not over yet. Please click on the next page to continue reading. Alas, Jill also understood that the other party was giving him a way out, but thinking of Brad's sacrifice, Jill couldn't swallow this breath in his heart. In addition, for Carlos, who was dedicated to saving the survivors, Jill couldn't bear to watch him being used by Umbrella without knowing anything. Things have happened. Whether it was done by Umbrella or not, our current goal is the same. Seeing that the anger of the two had subsided, Luo Guang came out to make peace. That's right, Carlos was a little grateful to Luo Guang for coming out to smooth things over. He immediately agreed with Luo Guang's words after hearing what he said, and then said to Jill with a serious face, "Jill, what kind of team is our UBCS? Just confirm it with your own eyes. And I will also confirm what you said about our company with my own eyes. In order to survive in this hell, let's put aside this argument for the time being." Okay, Jill was helpless, but she also agreed with Luo Guang and the others and nodded. The place where Luo Guang and Jill met was actually very close to the Central Street subway station. While talking, under the leadership of Carlos, the three came to the entrance of the Central Street subway station, and under the cover of Luo Guang and Jill, they opened the iron gate. Carlos entered first, and then used his arms to lift the iron gate to let Luo Guang and Jill come in quickly. Luo Guang didn't say that ladies were given priority. After all, the iron gate was big enough for two people to enter at the same time. After Luo Guang and Jill went in, one on the left and the other on the right, Carlos quickly closed the iron gate, listened to the noise outside, and after confirming that it was safe, he led Luo Guang and Jill to the subway train where his captain was. When going down the stairs, Carlos turned back and told Jill, "Don't tell my boss about what happened before, he has a bad temper." Jill didn't reply, but nodded silently. "Captain Victor, I'm back with two survivors I met on the road. Regarding the mission of contacting rescue, I found a good radio for contact, but it can't be used without power supply, so we still have to solve the problem at the substation." Carlos was the first to speak after entering, and also to introduce the name of his captain. There was only one person sitting on the subway chair in the entire carriage, and he should be the captain mentioned by Carlos. Captain Victor looked quite old, with pale hair and wrinkles on his face, but Luo Guang could still see the powerful muscles hidden under the military uniform. When Luo Guang and others entered, Captain Victor seemed to have just changed the dressing on his wound, and there was a pile of bloody bandages beside him. Captain Victor was holding his right abdomen, which should be the place where he was injured, but he didn't know what caused it. However, Captain Victor ignored Carlos' words, but said to Jill, "Oh, isn't this Jill Valentine, a former elite member of STARS who was trained by the Delta Special Forces?" Carlos also remembered the name of STARS, but after all, he came to Raccoon City on a mission not long after joining UBCS, so he didn't know some important information. "New soldier, you don't think you brought back a weakling, do you?" Without waiting for Jill to respond, the captain looked at Carlos again and said, "This person is not an ordinary survivor, but a survivor of the mansion incident." Carlos didn't know much about the mansion incident, and asked curiously, "But weren't all the people involved in that incident wiped out?" Ah! Carlos then remembered why he had an impression of the name STARS, but this was a make-up lesson that Carlos spent an hour on before going on a mission, and the relevant information he read was not confidential core information. Thinking that what he just said was too rude to the survivors, Carlos was about to explain to Jill, but Captain Victor deliberately said, "The initial investigation report said that no survivors were found, but later we found that there were still survivors, and the investigator submitted a new one again." "Carlos, you haven't finished reading the report on the mansion incident." "Yes, because there is not enough time." Although Carlos has joined UBCS for a short time, Captain Victor still has a grasp on Carlos, knowing that with Carlos's personality, he will only take a quick look at the information before leaving. Captain Victor was a captain after all, and he knew some details and the true situation of the mansion incident better than Carlos, but he had no obligation to explain it to Carlos. He looked at the watch on the inside of his left wrist and said, "We don't have time to waste. Since the plan to request rescue from the headquarters has failed, most of the team members are already Mia, then we will evacuate Raccoon City through the subway as planned." "Got it." Has the brother who restored the power come back? The teammate responsible for restoring the power set out much earlier than Carlos, but now Carlos is back, and the teammate who restored the power has not come back yet, and the power has not been restored. So it was a bit difficult for Carlos to say, but for Michael Victor, who had rich military experience, he was used to it. With a firm face, Victor did not show sadness, but his voice was much lower, and he said, "Their mission is likely to fail. Let Jill Valentine take care of the matter over there." "What?" Carlos was puzzled, but soon his face showed surprise. The captain actually pushed this task to a civilian. This chapter is not finished yet, please click on the next page to continue reading the exciting content. Jill immediately understood what the trouble Captain Victor was talking about, but Jill did not hesitate at all. After just a glance at the civilians walking in the next car, he agreed, "Okay, how to do it specifically?" "Captain, I don't agree. How can we let civilians do such a dangerous job?" Although Jill expressed his agreement, Carlos did not agree. "Carlos, she is from an elite team and a survivor of the mansion incident. She has much more experience than you in how to survive in the current Raccoon City." When Victor saw Jill, he thought of letting Jill complete the task of restoring electricity. The reason why he mentioned Jill's deeds when they met was to let Carlos, the silly boy, understand that Jill is not a vase. The invisible man Luo Guang, who was listening to the conversation of the three people, heard Victor's straightforward request, and Jill agreed to the other party's task without thinking, and couldn't help but feel a little strange. "It's really a dare to say and a dare to take." Victor continued to explain, "and our UBCS personnel are seriously insufficient. There are still civilians here who need our protection. We must use any useful combat power. Carlos, now is not the time to pay attention to these things. As a member of STARS, it is also my duty to protect civilians," Jill said very seriously. Although she was unhappy that the UBCS people pushed the matter to her, Jill saw that there were other civilians on the train. For these people, Jill also had to take this task and complete it. Seeing Jill's persistence, and his captain's recognition of Jill's ability, Carlos finally said, "Be careful, and take this." Carlos took out a walkie-talkie from behind, adjusted the channel, handed it to Jill, and said, "Go to the substation first to get the power supply, then go to the subway office to set up the route. If there is anything, contact through this. And the exit is at exit B of the subway station." Okay, Jill remembered Carlos' words, took the walkie-talkie, clipped it on the belt around his waist, nodded, and left the train without looking back. Seeing Jill go away, Captain Victor breathed a sigh of relief and said to Luo Guang, who was quietly listening to the conversation, "Luo, I didn't expect you to stay here. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 9. Luo Guang was a little surprised to be called out by Captain Victor, but he still maintained the expression on his face and did not show any flaws. "But do you and Luo Guang from Umbrella Company have the same appearance, or are they very similar?" Luo Guang thought about it and didn't know whether the situation was good or bad. Damn temporary assignment. Luo Guang didn't know what kind of person Luo Guang from Umbrella Company was, nor did he know how Captain Victor and that person met, or what their relationship was. Because Luo Guang did not inherit the memory of Luo Guang, an Umbrella intelligence agent, Luo Guang did not want to talk too much with the other party, and his words were relatively concise, fearing that the secret would be exposed accidentally and cause suspicion. It seems that intelligence agents are not easy to do as a temporary mission. Captain Victor smiled, but Luo Guang couldn't tell what the smile meant. Luo Guang shrugged and said helplessly, "It's the company's rules." "Yes, it's the company's rules," Captain Victor agreed. Carlos looked around at his captain and Luo Guang with shock on his face. He thought he had saved two ordinary civilians, but it turned out that one was an elite member of STARS and the other was an intelligence agent of Umbrella Company. It turns out that Luo Guang is an employee of Umbrella Company, so he interrupted Jill's groundless accusations against the company. Recalling Luo Guang's previous words to smooth things over, Carlos thought to himself, "But how did these two people get together?" Carlos was a little confused, but he quickly thought of the reason. Gil's attitude towards Luo Guang was not the same as towards himself at Umbrella Company. Considering Luo Guang's identity as an intelligence agent, it was probably Luo Guang who deliberately concealed his identity. Victor's teammates didn't care that Luo Guang didn't want to reveal too much. Intelligence agents are like that, talk less and listen more. As a former soldier and now a mercenary, Captain Victor now only cares about whether he can complete the tasks assigned to him by his superiors. "How did you get hurt?" While Jill and Victor were talking, Luo Guang was observing each other and found that Captain Victor's left hand had been covering his right waist and abdomen, and asked tentatively. "It was scraped by debris from the explosion." After hearing Luo Guang's question, Carlos looked at Luo Guang's movements a little nervously, but Victor answered calmly. It seemed that Victor was not surprised that Luo Guang would ask this question. Luo Guang thought so, and sketched the image of Luo Guang of Umbrella Company in his mind. He was taciturn, put his own interests first, and had difficulty trusting others. Luo Guang stared into Victor's eyes, looked at each other, and then nodded. "What's the situation now?" "I need guns and ammunition." Although Luo Guang has an employee card, there is no information such as military rank on it, so Luo Guang doesn't know who is higher in rank between him and Victor, so it is useless. The form of the order, judging from what Captain Victor said to Luo Guang at the beginning, does not seem to be a superior-subordinate relationship. Carlos could answer this question, pointed to the empty arms box at the other end of the workshop, and said, "There is no extra ammunition here. We encountered a lot of things along the way. The ammunition was either lost or used up. To be honest, we really need to evacuate as soon as possible." Really, Luo Guang sighed, and Luo Guang no longer struggled with what he didn't have. Just as he was about to say something, someone opened the door again and came in. A man with a hooked nose, wearing the same uniform and armband of UBCS as Carlos and Victor, walked in. Eyes as sharp as vultures scanned the car. When he saw Luo Guang, he snorted and said contemptuously, "You haven't escaped yet. Aren't you the one who wanted to run away quickly?" The other party's tone was a bit contemptuous, so Luo Guang's reply was also stinging. When Luo Guang saw the man in front of him for the first time, an alarm sounded in his heart. Either it was because of his heart, or it was just Luo Guang's prejudice that he was a selfish and dangerous person with a villain look on his face. But no matter what, Luo Guang decided to stay away from this guy, and he had to be careful of this guy stabbing him in the back. Of course, if possible, Luo Guang wanted to stab this guy in the waist and solve the hidden dangers in advance. The other party still had that stinking look on his face, and he felt like he was rejecting others. Based on Luo Guang's observation, his answer probably matched the other party's impression of Luo Guang. "Zinoviev, how is the situation outside?" Victor was not interested in the relationship between the two and asked about the hook-nosed man Nikolai Zinoviev. "It's still the same thing. The rescue signal can't be sent out, and all the administrative departments of Raccoon City are paralyzed. Nikolai Zinoviev's mission is to conduct reconnaissance. Of course, in fact, Nikolai Zinoviev has other tasks. His real job is as a supervisor for Umbrella Corporation. UBCS dispatched a total of 4 platoons to Raccoon City to perform rescue and cleanup missions, namely Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta teams. Among them, Michael Victor is the captain of the Delta team, and Nikolai Zinoviev is the captain of the Beta team. Nikolai Zinoviev was following the Delta team at this time, and all his Beta team teammates were sent to the hands of BAW, that is, biological and chemical weapons, and lost their lives, and Nikolai Zinoviev. The purpose of husband's doing this is to complete the task assigned to him by Umbrella Company, to collect combat data on biological and chemical weapons. At this moment, following behind the Delta team is also based on the same reason. Using the Delta team as a test subject for biological and chemical weapons is also to monitor the team as an eye of Umbrella to prevent it from doing things that are not in the interests of Umbrella. Although Michael Victor was employed by Umbrella as a member of UBCS, he did not join voluntarily, but was forced by the situation. After retiring from the regular army, Captain Victor became the leader of an underground guerrilla organization and participated in a series of terrorist actions to fight for independence for the local people. He also used his unparalleled leadership ability to carry out several successful operations, including the attack on the ambassador's residence. However, when he tried to lead a group of refugees across the border, Michael Victor was surrounded by government forces. For the safety of the refugees, he and his comrades immediately surrendered. However, in the International Tribunal, he was sentenced to death for terrorist attacks and will be executed the next day. However, a few hours later, Umbrella's security experts made a deal with him. The content of the deal was that he would join UBCS in exchange for the safety of his subordinates. With the shadow of death approaching, Michael Victor naturally gave his life to Umbrella without hesitation, and as one of the terms of the contract, his wife and subordinates were immediately acquitted. Umbrella rescued Michael Victor's wife and subordinates not out of mercy, but for the sake of profit. According to the investigators' assessment report, Umbrella believed that Michael Victor's military ability was worth doing so, and his wife and subordinates were the bargaining chips, or hostages, that Umbrella used to manipulate Michael Victor to complete various difficult and unknown tasks for itself. On the other hand, Nikolai Zinoviev did these things not because he was so loyal to Umbrella, but after becoming an observer, he could obtain more sufficient intelligence than other team members when performing these biochemical tasks related to Umbrella. In addition to ensuring the priority of escape, he also received nearly 10 times more rewards than others after the mission. For Umbrella, compared with Mikhail Viktor, who was forced to join, Nikolai Genoviev, who had no conscience, was cruel and ruthless and loved money, was more suitable to be a monitor of Umbrella, or to put it bluntly, a lackey of Umbrella. Then we can only see how far that STARS can go, Captain Viktor whispered after hearing Nikolai's words. Captain Viktor is not the kind of person who puts his hopes on others, but there are only a few UBCS teammates who have been following him. At this time, the only people he can use are Carlos, a new recruit, Nikolai, who cannot be trusted, and Tyrell, who is capable but has a mission. Raccoon City is not an ordinary battlefield where humans fight each other and become political victims. More enemies are various biochemical monsters caused by biochemical leaks. In this regard, Jill's experience is not worse than his own. In addition, her original job is to protect the safety of a place. This makes Captain Viktor feel at ease to hand over this important task to Jill. STARS, Nikolai heard Viktor whisper. Jill Valentine. Jill will always come back to the subway train after completing the mission. Sooner or later, the two will meet, so Captain Viktor has no intention of hiding it. Oh, Nikolai seemed to have thought of something interesting, with his mouth corners raised. Without waiting for Viktor, who was treating his injuries, to agree, he directly proposed that he could still contact the outside world in a place, and left without looking back. The two were nominally of the same level, so Captain Viktor's eagle-like eyes just stared at Nikolai's departure, and said nothing. The carriage fell into silence. Luo Guang was taking advantage of the time to stop and rest, and immediately devoted himself to learning the knowledge carried by the system. While browsing the information displayed in his mind by the system, he was still thinking about something. If I remember correctly, if Jill was there, this escape train would be destroyed by the goddess of vengeance who caught up. So, if Jill didn't get on this train, there would be a high probability that nothing would happen here, and he could quickly leave Raccoon City. This is a good thing no matter how you think about it. As for Jill, Luo Guang is not worried that this strong woman will not survive. Thinking of this, and preparing for this, Luo Guang took out the notebook that recorded some of Jill's surveillance information and studied it after confirming that everyone around him was his own people of Umbrella. Jill has been secretly investigating the research and development of biological viruses and biological weapons by Umbrella, hoping to report to the government after obtaining evidence and rely on national power to defeat the behemoth Umbrella. The reason for the investigation is that Jill is a survivor of the mansion incident. It can be said that there is a great hatred between Jill and Umbrella. Personally, most of Jill's STARS teammates were killed by biological weapons. Publicly, S.T.A.R.SS duty is to protect citizens, and Umbrella is destroying the people living here. Rumor has it that the establishment of STARS and the subsequent mansion investigation was to make STARS a combat target of various biological and chemical weapons in order to collect data for improvement. Looking at the contents of the notebook, Jill did not investigate much information, and did not find any tangible evidence to prove Umbrella's criminal behavior. Therefore, Umbrella's Luo Guang only had the task of surveillance but not silence. This chapter is not over, please click on the next page to continue reading. But the more he watched, the more Luo Guang felt that Luo Guang of Umbrella Company was a pervert. As the surveillance time became longer and longer, the things recorded by Luo Guang became more and more detailed. Even when Jill was taking a shower, the toilet time is recorded one by one through various means. As Jill's investigation of Umbrella Corporation stalled, the notebook's records became more like the diary of a stalker who changed his mind. Frowning, Luo Guang closed the notebook to avoid contaminating his eyes again. Find a fire to burn it later, Luo Guang thought. Now that he was carrying this notebook, Luo Guang felt inexplicably ashamed. Looking at Carlos' side, Carlos had just played with a piece of equipment next to Victor and didn't pay attention to it. Captain Victor didn't look towards Luo Guang either, but lowered his head and pondered something. Neither of them looked towards Luo Guang, so Luo Guang breathed a sigh of relief. Perhaps noticing Luo Guang's gaze, Captain Victor raised his head and looked back at Luo Guang. Luo, after thinking about it, I still can't place my hopes only on a former STARS person. Raccoon City is too dangerous for this to be safe. For Raccoon City, it was Jill who was too dangerous. Luo Guang thought that Jill seemed to have the title of Queen of Arms, while Claire's title seemed to come from Walking Arsenal. But Luo Guang understood what Victor wanted to say. It seemed that the old man in front of him wanted to find Jill. If Gil is still alive, then the two of them should work together. If Gil is not found or only his body is found, then the task of restoring the subway power will naturally fall on Luo Guang. I understand, needless to say, if Luo Guang didn't know about the bombing of Raccoon City, then Luo Guang would naturally reply to him. Although Luo Guang could also raise objections and let Carlos do this, now that Carlos knows his identity, with his character, if Carlos finds Gil, he will most likely tell Gil about Luo Guang's identity. So Luo Guang takes the initiative and seizes the opportunity to find Jill to gain favor. As for how to gain favor, as long as the two of them can complete the mission together, they can naturally gain the favor of their comrades in life and death. But at this time, Luo Guang forgot that Carlos didn't need to find Jill at all, he just needed to tell him through the walkie-talkie. Seeing Luo Guang's immediate agreement, Captain Victor showed a rare smile, took out the walkie-talkie from his waist, adjusted the channel and threw it to Luo Guang. Luo Guang held it in one hand and was about to try to contact Jill when he was stopped by Carlos with suspicious eyes and said, "The signal cannot be transmitted in the subway station, and I don't know if Jill needs to keep quiet." Okay, Luo Guang didn't try again and took a short rest. Since time was tight, he got up and left the carriage. As if something suddenly occurred to him, he turned back and said seriously to the two of them, "The target of the goddess of revenge is STARS, for your sake, and for the sake of those civilians, it's better not to let Jill take a ride. Also, be careful with Nikolai, he is a monitor assigned to UBCS by Umbrella." After speaking, Luo Guang left the car without looking back, without waiting for Carlos to speak. Evolution begins with Resident Evil. Author, Wei Tongmiao. Chapter 10. There was a reason why Luo Guang chose to tell the two people about the Nemesis's goal and Nikolai's true position. Both of them are UBCS affiliated with Umbrella Corporation, and they happen to be in the same position as Luo Guang, the intelligence agent. Judging from Delta Team Captain Victor's attitude towards Luo Guang, there is still a certain foundation of trust between the two. Only in this way can Luo Guang's information be trusted. On the contrary, if Luo Guang tells this information to Jill, Jill will immediately question Luo Guang's identity and refuse to believe Luo Guang's information. Luo Guang is not hostile to Jill, but the relationship between the two is not such that Luo Guang has to work hard to convince Jill. There is no way Luo Guang and Jill, who have traveled here, are naturally in a hostile position. Even if Luo Guang does not conceal his identity from the beginning, Jill will believe that an Umbrella Company intelligence officer suddenly has a conscience and tells him such important information. You must know that only those who can know this information are at a certain level of Umbrella Company and have access to it. Going back to the insurance mission that Luo Guang took on, is the image of Luo Guang, the intelligence agent of Umbrella Company, the kind of person who can be both literary and military? Why would you let yourself do such a dangerous thing? Although Luo Guang seemed to Carlos and the others to accept the task calmly, in fact Luo Guang was not as strong and calm as he imagined. Nearly 4 hours have passed since time travel, and the excitement brought about by obtaining the system has long since disappeared, leaving only confusion about the future. After leaving the subway train, at the subway ticket window, Luo Guang stuffed 9mm bullets into the matching magazine of the G17 pistol while thinking. The system is not powerful, but it does play a huge role for Luo Guang in Raccoon City. At least now Luo Guang can deal with ordinary zombies with ease. But in the previous battle with the Goddess of Revenge, if the system had not briefly controlled the body to avoid the tentacles sweep, he would have been seriously injured, and then the treatment failed, and he died safely. Even if the system is added, the chance of winning against biochemical weapons such as the Tyrant type is still too low. If this world is indeed a world with the background of the Resident Evil game, and taking the biohazard in Raccoon City as an opportunity, biochemical terror incidents around the world will become very frequent, and it will be impossible if we do not have enough strength to protect ourselves. Luo Guang thought in his mind, and the system naturally read Luo Guang's thoughts. As an adapter, the system could change Luo Guang's mood by adjusting Luo Guang's hormone secretion, but the system did not do so. As long as Luo Guang is still within the scope of human abilities, without the help of heavy weapons, it is indeed difficult for Luo Guang to defeat biochemical weapons such as Tyrant, which are immune to the damage of most light weapons. At this stage, the system has no good solution for this. After all, it only plays a supporting role. Whether it can successfully evolve in the end depends on its own adapter, Luo Guang. Luo Guang did not feel depressed for a long time. After crushing the bullets and putting the remaining loose bullets back into his backpack, Luo Guang cheered up, held the gun in his hand, and left the Central Street subway station along the route that Jill had left. There were not too many obstacles that were difficult to deal with along the way. With the help of the system, Luo Guang walked towards the substation without getting lost. On the way, he followed the place where the zombies that Jill had killed and followed the path that Jill had walked before. After Jill got the dagger, she tended to use melee weapons to deal with these ordinary zombies. Luo Guang thought as he looked at the wounds on the heads of the dead zombies on the ground. Because Jill mostly used close combat methods to deal with enemies, no other zombies gathered following the sound of gunfire, so Luo Guang's journey was very smooth. Kendo Gun Store. Luo Guang looked up at the name of the store in front of him. The name Kendo is taken from the surname of the owner of the gun shop, Robert Kendo. When the biohazard broke out in Raccoon City, Robert Kendo distributed the weapons in his gun shop to the surrounding neighbors. In the first wave, saved many people during the outbreak. So the door of the gun store was open at this time, but from the outside, it didn't look like it had been smashed or bought for $0. It looks like all the good stuff inside has been taken away. Luo Guang thought so, but now a section of the street collapsed as if there was a gas explosion. There were many zombies on the opposite side and in the pit. It seemed that Jill did not go that way. Indeed, Luo Guang was also worried about being attacked on the way up and down. Since there was a shop next door with an unlocked door, and according to the shop habits of most lighthouse countries, there would usually be a back door or a passage for purchasing goods, so he might as well go in and try his luck. Luo Guang thought so and did the same. There was no one in the gun shop, but there were some noises from behind an iron door. Luo Guang still remembered Kendo and his daughter clearly, so he naturally did not disturb them. Since the store was still there, Luo Guang didn't move lightly and coughed to let him know that someone was coming. Luo Guang could hear the sound of someone moving inside the iron gate, but it was obvious that the people inside the iron gate had no intention of opening the door, and were instead guarding the people outside. There seemed to be a small number of antidotes in the hospital, but Luo Guang did not tell Ken Duo about this. First, the two of them did not have such a relationship, and second, Ken Duo fell into paranoia because his wife left and his daughter was infected. Whether Duo will listen to the words of the stranger Luo Guang is also unknown. In his daughter's last days, Kendo had already planned his own ending, and would not pursue the illusory hope with his daughter who was about to mutate into a zombie. Kendo would be angry with him if he didn't find the antidote, so he should not bother him. The gun shop was naturally emptied. Luo Guang took a glance and didn't see any useful items, so he quickly passed through the back door of Kendo's gun shop and continued to walk towards the substation. Bang, Bang. After leaving Kendo's gun shop and bypassing the broken road along the alley, Luo Guang continued to move towards the substation and soon arrived at a community-like place. Not long after, Luo Guang vaguely heard two consecutive gunshots, similar to the gunshots of his G17 pistol, probably the same model as his own. Is it Jill? Luo Guang guessed. Luo Guang immediately ran in the direction of the sound, and saw Jill being slowly surrounded by several zombie dogs near a community basketball court. The whole body was rotten, even the yellow-white leg bones were exposed, several tentacle-like things broke out of the flesh, waving aimlessly, and the white eyes looked accurately at Jill's position. Like a pack of hounds, the zombie dogs did not rush up rashly and become the dead souls under Jill's gun, but began to disperse and prepare to besiege Jill. Jill also knew the zombie dogs' thoughts at this time, but did not act rashly. The zombie dogs concentrated together to chase Jill, which was not conducive to Jill's defeat one by one, and it was easier to expose her weaknesses to the zombie dogs. Jill did not move. His left hand drew the short knife from his waist. He also saw the figure of Luo Guang holding a gun in his hand and nodded gently to Luo Guang. Just as the zombie dogs were about to complete the encirclement and prepare to launch an attack, two more shots were fired. It was Luo Guang who was ready to shoot with a G17, and the target of the shooting was the zombie dogs on both sides of Jill. There were also zombie dogs between Jill and Luo Guang, but Luo Guang didn't have much confidence in his marksmanship, so he set his sights on the zombie dogs on both sides of Jill. Jill reacted faster than other zombie dogs. The flash of fire from Luo Guang's first shot was like a signal light for running. Jill's body moved and rushed towards Luo Guang. Compared with Luo Guang, Jill was quite confident in his marksmanship. In addition, the zombie dogs were shorter in height. Jill's muzzle was slightly downward. Facing the zombie dogs blocking between Luo Guang and himself, he could basically say that he fired at the zombie dogs' heads, so naturally he didn't shoot off target. Jill didn't slow down. In Luo Guang's opinion, Jill shot the zombie dogs while breaking through to his side, which was very handsome. The zombie dog didn't react either. How could he, a hunter, suddenly become the opponent's prey? Naturally, he had no ability to fight back. With a wail, Jill jumped over before he fell down and joined Luo Guang. Taking advantage of the sneak attack, he killed one and injured another zombie dog. Afterwards, Luo Guang did not continue to shoot, but waited for Jill to join him. In a flash, Jill and Luo Guang joined together, and the other zombie dogs also reacted and launched a surprise attack, following Jill closely. Nice, Luo Guang praised Jill. Thanks. After joining together, Jill replied, gave up the ray, stood beside Luo Guang, raised his gun and shot. Luo Guang immediately shot and followed up when Jill gave way, aiming at the zombie dogs charging head-on in the narrow passage between the abandoned vehicles. These enemies had no space to hide, and Luo Guang, who was ready, would naturally not miss this opportunity, and killed a zombie dog in 2 or 3 shots. When the zombie dog in front fell, it tripped the one behind it that couldn't dodge in time. However, because the head of the zombie dog was erratic after it tripped, Luo Guang didn't target the tripped zombie dog, but aimed at the zombie dog that jumped up to avoid the car accident in front and shot 3 times. After the zombie dog jumped in the air, the trajectory of its head was much easier to predict, but Luo Guang's hit rate on moving targets was not high for the time being, so Luo Guang chose to shoot 3 times in a row and successfully killed the jumping zombie dog. The two of them unexpectedly had a tacit understanding and did not communicate in words. When Jill saw Luo Guang aiming at the zombie dog between the vehicles in the middle, he set his own target on the zombie dogs running and jumping on the roofs of each car. When the zombie dog jumped in the air, it was Jill's time to shoot. In order to be able to accurately eliminate the enemy, the two shot a little too much, but the 2 zombie dogs on the left and the one on the right still broke through, leaving less than 5 meters away from Luo Guang and the others. Jill, who was on Luo Guang's left, fired 3 more bullets, but this could only stop one zombie dog from rushing over. The other one was already drooling and greedily rushing towards Jill. At the critical moment, Jill bent down, threw away the G19 pistol in his right hand, and thrust his left hand holding the dagger upwards, stabbing the zombie dog's neck. Then he pushed his hands to the left and back along with the force of the zombie dog's rush, throwing the zombie dog away. Bang! Just as the zombie dog was about to get up, with a bang, Jill held the G19 pistol that had been thrown aside with both hands tightly, and fired the last bullet in the chamber. It hit the zombie dog's eyebrow. Jill turned around and observed the situation on Luo Guang's side. Although there was only one zombie dog on the right, considering that the zombie dog was moving at high speed, Luo Guang did not choose to save bullets. When the zombie dog jumped up, he pulled the trigger quickly and continuously, pouring bullets from the pistol on the zombie dog in mid-air. A bullet hit the joint of the zombie dog's left front leg, causing the zombie dog to stagger when it landed, and rolled off the roof of the car and landed in front of Luo Guang. The zombie dog was about to stand up, and was also hit in the head by Luo Guang's last bullet, and died. After a few seconds of silence, Luo Guang relaxed his tense body after confirming that there was no movement of other zombie dogs. After exhaling lightly, Luo Guang turned his head and said to Jill, who was about to ask a question, "It's not safe here, let's leave here first." Although the battle did not last long, Luo Guang and the others fired here after all, so Luo Guang was worried that the gunshots would attract zombies and some biological weapons that were several times more terrifying than zombies. Jill understood what Luo Guang meant and nodded. Then he changed the magazine of his weapon and walked towards the zombie dog, preparing to retrieve the short knife stuck in the zombie dog's neck. Seeing this, Luo Guang did not leave the transfer place immediately. Looking around, maybe because this is the zombie dog's territory, Luo Guang did not see any zombies for the time being, so he took out the bulk bullets and loaded the only magazine of his G17 pistol. Along the way, about 2 magazines of bullets were fired, and the box of 9mm bullets he got from the STARS safe house was almost gone. 5, 6, 7. Are there 7 bullets left? Luo Guang casually threw away the 9mm bullet box that had no bullets. "Come with me, I know a shortcut." Jill was much more familiar with the terrain of Raccoon City than Luo Guang, and quickly loaded the bullets and turned to Luo Guang and said, "I'm done here too." Luo Guang inserted the magazine, loaded the gun, and turned his eyes away from the G17 pistol. He turned his head and just said to Jill, "A zombie dog suddenly jumped out from the pile of cars on the right, aiming directly at Luo Guang." The system had already reacted, but the body's movements were still a beat slower. The gun was in his right hand. When he pointed it at the zombie dog, Luo Guang could clearly see the ferocious face of the zombie dog and smell the sewer-like stench. With a thud, the zombie dog directly knocked Luo Guang's right hand away and got rid of Luo Guang's G17 pistol. Luo Guang's face showed displeasure. His right hand met the force of the zombie dog's impact. He swung his right hand and smashed the zombie dog to the side. Luo Guang was about to raise his gun to shoot. Jill, who had reacted a long time ago but did not shoot rashly because the zombie dog was very close to Luo Guang, immediately shot and solved the zombie dog. Seeing this, Luo Guang exhaled and looked at his right arm. 3 bloody wounds were faintly visible in the clothes that were also torn into 3 pieces.